Prologue. Our world is a mysterious place where human life tends to discover and invent unimaginable things, but this beautiful place where life is born also generates destruction. Technology continues to develop at an incredible speed, and each new year is superior to the previous one. So sooner or later the ambition of mankind brought about war. Since there is a competition to develop technology superior to that of other countries, silent wars have been triggered all over the world. Everyone thought that after World War I, mankind had learned to take care of this planet and rebuild a better world for all life. But that was only a distant dream. Instead, now humanity is about to pay the price. Natural disasters, excessive industrial development, and endless competition inexplicably started the global environment. Disease and famine will eventually blanket this beautiful world. The air will be filled with high levels of pollution, and an all-consuming virus will arrive so fast that humanity will not have a chance to react. Many babies will not have the chance to be born in good conditions years later, and this world, which was considered a paradise, will become the hell of the living dead. In France, a type of deadly virus that was extremely dangerous is being investigated. It is not known exactly how hell will begin, where the living dead walk the earth looking to bite humans, but this will be the end of a beginning. Aaron Darcy, who came to this world, will work hard to change the course of humanity and create a strong community. For the future of him and his people, he will not touch his heart to accomplish his goals. Cold and unemotional when it comes to taking out his enemies, he will make an excellent survivor in this world, fighting mercilessly against his enemies while using his allies to get what he wants. Will he manage to survive the universe of The Walking Dead? That will only be discovered in the future. Dreams are journeys where our imagination can create from the most realistic to the unthinkable, all in a span of 7 to 8 hours. In a heavy sleep, Aaron Darcy, who was covered in sweat, could not wake up. Without him noticing, the clock on his wall stopped spinning. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Aaron had already woken up when the sound of that paused clock became louder and louder in his ears, but he didn't move immediately. He closed his eyes again and felt the surroundings around him. In the distance there was a sound coming from a television. Aaron Darcy, who felt that everything was fine, opened his eyes again. At first glance, this place seemed to be a very dark room. Where am I supposed to be? This is my body, don't. Calm down. Aaron sat down on what seemed to be his bed, looked at his hands, and then touched his face. This feeling oppressed him again, feeling that this is not his body and his life, seeing things through different eyes and acting strangely to others. No, this time feels very different from the other time. According to his memories, this happens to him very often, being expelled from school for hitting classmates and having violent impulses. That feeling of strangeness came over him more and more frequently, but now he knew that some kind of information from his dream was fueling it. Although the doctors diagnosed him with depersonalization, derealization disorder, he knew he was not crazy. This was not his life, and he was most likely in some sort of dream. Putting on his shoes, Aaron awkwardly walked out of his room. He looked at his alcoholic father, who kept staring at the TV day and night as he walked to the door. Hey, motherfucker. Where the fuck do you think you're going? Aaron completely ignored the words of that man who was his father and walked out of his house. He looked around and with a heavy breath he ran hard. This time it's different, I'm sure. While running with all his strength, Aaron Darcy reached a kind of park. Due to his exhaustion he dropped on the ground. Looking towards the position of the sun, he felt a buzzing in his ear. On his wrist, the watch he was wearing had stopped its hands, just like the one in his room, and he vaguely remembered that yesterday he picked it up from a pile of garbage. Aaron looked around again and found that many people were looking at him with twitching eyes, apparently puzzled by his behavior. What the fuck are they looking at? He subconsciously pinched his thigh with his hand. Pain. This doesn't look like a dream. After looking at his body again, Aaron realized he was wearing clothes and everything seemed fine. Feeling the eyes looking at him like a weirdo, Aaron felt himself getting angrier and angrier. Just as he was about to say some kind words, a feeling of dizziness hit him. Aaron closed his eyes, feeling suddenly sick. He tried to endure this feeling without making any weird sounds. After 10 minutes, the dizziness finally disappeared. Aaron took a deep breath, got up and ran out of the park. He needed to find out the current situation immediately and take initiative. Ignoring the stares of passers-by, Aaron ran to a shopping area and slowed down. Aaron Darcy, walking slowly through the streets, observed the details around him. After passing a newspaper stand, he picked up a newspaper and began to read it. Printed, May 23, 2010, Georgia, Atlanta. Looking at the gentleman at the stand, Aaron casually asked, "Excuse me, is today May 23rd? Yes. Of the year 2010? Surely it's 2010, right? Ignoring the curious looks of the people around him, Aaron asked the same question in different places, and everyone strangely gave him the same answer. When he came out of one store, the owner looked at the young man coming out with a thoughtful expression and muttered, "It seems that young man had another attack of his illness." Although the previous times were not this way, Aaron suffered attacks of his disorder from time to time, so many people knew him in this place. Aaron found a shady spot by a tree and sat down, making her mind work rapidly. Atlanta, Georgia, 2010. Am I truly in that world? I don't feel strange anymore. This body feels like mine. Do I really? I could be on The Walking Dead? Haha. How is that possible? Aaron shook his head and thought, but could I have been transported to this world without realizing it? Isn't that depersonalization disorder actually something illusory? Am I not drugged? For some strange reason, Aaron suddenly remembered having lived another life. That person who could be him had a somewhat depressing life, but finally died apparently by thieves. At that moment, he felt as if something was slipping from his analysis, but now that no longer mattered. On careful thought, Aaron discovered something more satisfying, namely, he now has a lot of knowledge that he didn't understand before, including some languages. Before he could only speak English and like everyone else used it to communicate. Now he is fluent in Spanish, French and some Norwegian swearing. And the rest of the knowledge is about things he seemed to know but didn't know before today, mostly fighting experience. Thinking about this, Aaron began to recall information about The Walking Dead and could remember many details he had carefully studied. The Walking Dead story started in the year 2010, without knowing exactly the unclear timeline of the main events should at least the plot start 2 months after Rick Grimes woke up from his coma in the King Country Hospital outside Atlanta, Georgia, shortly after that the main story he was very familiar with began. But here's the problem. Dr. Jenner of the CDC, when Rick's team arrived at the CDC to seek shelter, told a lot of valuable information, so if you consider that, the apocalypse would begin at least 120 days before the main plot began. The so-called wildfire plan is actually when the governments of many countries find an unrecorded source of deadly disease, so experts in biology or experts in the field were recruited to discuss countermeasures. Once personnel are chosen, this building is locked down with nothing able to get out or in so easily. In this lab they recognized that the virus began to spread long before Rick Grimes fell into a coma. When Rick awoke, it was at least 2 months after the outbreak of the virus and more than 10 years for major events to happen in the far future plot. If calculated from early April, the plot would begin in early July. So now it is May 23rd, you still have more than a month before determining the exact start. So there are many ways to confirm if you are in the world of The Walking Dead. He can search nearby locations to find the famous Rick Grimes, just like you can go to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta to look for Dr. Jenner. Thinking of this, Aaron regained his composure. After all, this was a dangerous world, but he knew that this world, The Walking Dead, the walkers would not be the only enemies of humans in the future. Next, Aaron had to get some money first. After all, it would be difficult to move according to his plans without money. Getting up from the ground, Aaron looked around and searched for a quiet place to find a clever way to get money. Kings County, a suburb of Atlanta. In a police car parked on the side of the road, 2 people were talking. If the bastard now dared to advance again, I'd really smash his fucking face in. Calm down, there are assholes everywhere. Rick, sometimes I really don't know what to do. This county job isn't for me. What are you going to do if you don't do this? Please be mechanical in this place. Haha. Maybe I'll consider it. Shane asked, by the way, how's Carl? How's Carl? Come to my house for dinner tonight, you can ask him yourself. He's fine, I expect you to brew my favorite beer. Don't worry. The 2 were sitting in the car, chatting and eating fast food. If Aaron was here, he would know that these 2 cops were Rick and Shane, some of the important people in the main plot of this world. Now, as Aaron discovered that he was in the same town where Rick was supposed to be working as a cop, he had to slowly familiarize himself with the plans he was going to make and have some relationship with Rick. Considering the future, it wouldn't hurt to have that relationship. While he was thinking about all this, he went into the mall to get something fresh to eat. He needed to hydrate as soon as possible. If there is no money, borrowing things can be the solution in extreme cases. This world doesn't have a nice future and it's something you can't avoid. The size of the supermarket is small, but there is plenty of stuff. The owner is a very nice middle-aged man. Walking through the ice cream area, Aaron picked up a chocolate popsicle and started eating it. He really didn't have much money, but that's not a problem he couldn't handle. As he was thinking what to do, an old lady stopped with her cart and said, "Hey, you can't eat the ice cream without paying for it, I'll let a worker know." "Don't bother me, I'm the owner's son. Aaron paid no attention to the grumpy grandmother. The best way to think was to eat something, and now he had no room to argue over a popsicle. Just as the old lady was making her way to the counter, a heated argument began to sound louder and louder from the checkout counter. As Aaron approached, the store owner was arguing with a man. Aaron stood to the side and listened intently to the argument. It was probably that the man bought frozen meat and a bottle of vinegar to cook at home, but one of the employees gave him a different apple vinegar than he had asked for. The man just wanted his money back, but the store owner politely asked him to buy another bottle of vinegar, because this was not his problem, and besides, the vinegar had already been opened and used, but it seems that this was not clear and the argument escalated. Standing next to them were two police officers, Rick and Shane. Rick was trying to defuse the situation, while Shane covered his head, not understanding why the discussion was so heated. You already opened the vinegar bottle. Even if we made a mistake, don't you know to look at what you buy? Besides, it looks like you didn't dislike the vinegar because you finished half the bottle. Seeing this, the gentleman who was complaining did not like it and threw the bottle in his face. The store owner was not going to allow this and also responded with direct blows to his face. Aaron watched all of this with surprise. He didn't know whether to be surprised to see Rick and Shane or because an elderly man was beating the crap out of a man. Aaron looked around and suddenly a man in a black sweatshirt in the corner of the store caught his eye. Aaron wasn't stupid. This person obviously wanted a drink while the store in general was a mess. The corner of Aaron Darcy's mouth turned up. He had been worried that he wouldn't have a chance to start a conversation with Rick, but now, along came a helpful ticket. The young man in the black hoodie pretended to be wandering, and walked slowly toward the door of the store, looking as interested in the dispute at the cashier as everyone else. After stuffing a few more things into his pockets, the young man who thought he had committed the robbery of the year felt that everything was ready, turned around and wanted to leave, but he did not expect that when he was about to come out his arm was suddenly grabbed, and a voice sounded next to him in an excited tone. Hey buddy, you just want to leave without paying, don't you know that stealing stuff is illegal and you could pay a fine or directly go to jail? Although the guy in the black hoodie looked like he was very calm on the surface, he was actually very nervous. After all, there were two damn cops standing not far from the door. At that moment, a madman grabbed him by the arm. At first he wanted to break free, but the grip was too strong and he couldn't break free. Aaron subconsciously turned his head and looked at Rick and Shane, and found that the other party's attention had not yet been diverted in his direction. He was a little frustrated, but he did not let go of this young man who was breaking the law. Seeing that he was not let go, the boy in the black hoodie pulled out a small knife in his right hand and attacked Aaron Darcy's wrist. You meddling fucking idiot. Ah! In the next second, Aaron, who saw the knife aimed at his wrist, violently pulled on the body of the young man in the black hoodie, and the not-so-skinny young man was sent flying through the air and fell in front of Rick. Am I that strong? Thought Aaron with a mischievous grin. At this time, Rick also noticed the movements next to him, cocked his head and looked at a young man in a black hoodie who suddenly crashed next to him with a knife in his hand. Shane unconsciously drew his weapon and yelled, "Don't move, drop the knife." The young man in the black hoodie was stunned by the fall. Just as he was about to stand up and smash that meddling idiot's face in, he realized that someone was pointing a gun at him, feeling helpless about the situation. Damn. After seeing the situation, he dropped the knife and deftly put his hands behind his head, but his eyes were fixed on Aaron Darcy, and he spat a few words silently. You are dead. Aaron understood, but only smiled and secretly raised the middle finger of his right hand and pointed at the young man in the black sweatshirt. At that moment, Rick, the old man and the man in dispute noticed everything that was happening behind their backs. Rick on his side kicked the dagger together with the young man in the black sweatshirt against the wall. The man who was still claiming that the vinegar wasn't used also stopped talking. He muttered under his breath and didn't keep making noise. He turned around and walked out of the store. What happened? How come this guy is lying in front of me with a knife all of a sudden? Before the two had time to communicate, they heard a young man no more than 20 years old speak next to them. Officers, I can explain. Just now I saw this person taking advantage of the chaos to steal things from the store. While you guys were settling the dispute and didn't pay attention to the surroundings. When I saw that he was about to flee, my good citizen personality came out of me and I stopped him. I did not expect this fellow to want to attack me with a knife, and I had no choice but to proceed to use force. I did not think he would fall right in front of you. The young man who had become a hero was Aaron Darcy, and he held out his hands as he spoke, with an innocent look on his face. With nothing against him, he pointed out that he had no choice but to use force. Rick watched Aaron with chocolate on his lips stay silent. He turned his head and found many store products in his pockets. Shane. Got it. They both had things straight and a pair of handcuffs had already restrained the wrists of the young man in the black sweatshirt. After getting all the stolen goods out of him, Shane pressed the young man in the black sweatshirt and nodded towards Aaron Darcy, reached out his hand and patted him on the shoulder. Well done, buddy. Rick turned to the supermarket owner and said, Thomas, the other party seems to have left, so this matter is resolved. We still have to take the thief back to the police station, so we'll leave first. Before Thomas could speak, he turned around and said to Aaron, Sir, thank you for your brave actions. Haha, I'm only 20 years old and I had to do it for the good of society. Aaron waved his hands with a smile. Rick smiled, nodded and said, I don't know if you have the time. As grateful as we all are, I still need to make an official statement. If you're busy, you can talk another day. That's okay. I have nothing to do today. I'll cooperate with whatever is necessary. Okay. Please follow me. Rick turned and walked in the direction of the police car. Aaron followed Rick with a smile on his face. As a connoisseur of the main plot, he was a little excited to meet these two people so quickly. Thank you again for your cooperation, young Aaron. Shouldn't we take you to your parents? Rick looked at the worker and handed it to Aaron Darcy. As for how he had this identity, it turns out he was a student before he was expelled for fighting. With almost 20 years old and many years of schooling lost due to his previous behavior, he didn't have a good future in school and had to work to earn some extra money. That's very kind of you, Officer Grimes, and that's what I should have done. I can go home alone. Just call me Rick. It's not very common to be called by my last name. Okay, Rick. Then I won't bother you. Bye. Take care, young man, and don't forget to let the police know if you encounter another situation like this. It's not good to take chances like you did a moment ago. After Rick finished speaking, he turned his head and walked to the police car, and Shane in the driver's seat waved to Aaron Darcy. Looking at the back of the man in front of him, Aaron was grateful to have had a conversation with these great people. It would be helpful in the future. We'll see you again, Rick. Now that time is money. It was time to prepare for the end of the world. When Aaron turned around, there was a cell phone of the young man in the black sweatshirt in his hands. Aaron thought that person was a gangster, but he wasn't. He found out from Rick's words, and it turns out that he is a member of a local gang. After roughly verifying the information on the phone, Aaron found some useful clues from the snippets. Anyway, they are bad people. I should support the future and do something about them. Aaron said as he wiped off the chocolate from the popsicle he had eaten. Old Aaron was called crazy. No matter how he behaved, everyone knew to stay away from him if they didn't want to get beaten up. Long before he knew where he was, Aaron would have angry outbursts and would inevitably hit people who caused him trouble. This was no surprise due to his history with the schools. However, everything was different now. He knew where he was and what was to come in this world. Some time later, Aaron returned home and changed his clothes. Tonight there was a very lively party. He had given it a lot of thought, and the only way to get money fast was to steal it, and no, it wasn't by robbing a bank or anything like that. Turns out the phone he took from the guy in the black hoodie belonged to a gang that was recently making major moves in Atlanta. Their work mainly focused on being the errand boys for criminal groups. Sifting through the messages looking for anything valuable, Aaron found a very interesting chat. Weasel. Dove, the green grass will be received under the abandoned bridge in the out-of-the-way place in Atlanta. This time you will go with the new guy. Aaron Darcy. Just the two of us. Weasel. We had already talked about it. You do the errand boy job and the money in your pockets won't be lacking. Train the new boy. Aaron Darcy. Anything else? Weasel. They will be more cautious this time. Recently the Atlanta police are on their heels. They need to hide their green grass and us work. Weasel. Once you get the package, go to the shop and we will relocate it from that location. The new guy will be waiting for you on the street outside Martha's laundromat. Aaron Darcy. Got it. I never expected heaven to send me this easy money. I hope everything goes as I'm planning it. That's right. Aaron is a determined person with a clear mind. Having the intention to steal that money, he knew that the chances of dying were high, but if he takes into account the profits, he is willing to take that risk. In this world, if he cannot survive that task, he has no chance in the future. Now, his confidence lies in his experience that he somehow gained and his self-confidence, of course. Generally speaking, if he cannot get money to secure safer plans, Aaron did not know what to do in the future. Therefore, he was confident that he could do this and play a good role tonight. After getting ready, Aaron searched through his father's things for useful things and found a curved knife, enough to use if necessary. Looking at his father, Aaron sighed with a strange feeling. This man, since his mother left him, always drank. He vaguely remembered his father beating him for petty things. Where are you going, you fucking bum? Mr. Darcy asked. Seeing that his father spoke to him, Aaron said, I'm going to work, we need money, don't we? Without another word, Aaron left the house and walked towards the laundromat where he was supposed to be picked up. He honestly didn't know if his attire could fool the new guy, so it would be all over if he is identified as an imposter. Some time later, a car pulled up to the side of Aaron, the car window was opened, and a person inside said, The Weasel sent me, are you the one to teach me? Yes, the Weasel told me you were the new one. Are you ready to teach you about the business? Aaron kept his mind cool. If the situation didn't convince him, he would definitely retire from this place. I'm ready to do it, brother, I will learn well, said the man with an enthusiastic smile. Aaron raised his eyebrows, slightly surprised. He didn't know this would be so easy. Although his outfit was similar to what the boy in the black hoodie was wearing, he didn't know the process was so simple. I'll show you what you need, let's get going. As if it all came naturally, Aaron climbed into the car. On the way, the boy named Daniel asked him a lot about the business. Although he had been given an introduction, he wanted to hear advice about more experienced people. You just have to stay calm. Don't ask questions that shouldn't be asked and don't put your feelings into this business. Aaron evidently knew nothing about the business. Even now he was wondering if it was a good idea to get involved in all this. I'd been told that. Daniel nodded with a serious look. But still, Aaron wanted to have everything prepared for the end of the world. His senses made him make decisions without much questioning the dangers. When he read about the money on that person's phone, it seemed like a prize of life for his dire situation. After looking out over the landscape toward Atlanta, he knew that the long road to the rendezvous point was long. Therefore, he had to stay calm. He still didn't know much about his fighting skills. The only thing he felt when he had a knife in his hand was that he could cut anything that was put in front of him. Besides, his strength wasn't weak at all, but he felt it wasn't enough. Looking through the phone, Aaron discovered many things in the photographs that had been taken. The gang this idiot belonged to was terrible. They were not only involved with money laundering but also with drugs. This group of scum definitely needed a lesson. Looks like we got here before the others. Daniel turned off the car and then lit a cigarette. I thought you were blacker, but it looks like you're not. I've been using a cream to lighten my skin lately. I'll recommend it to you once we're done with this, Aaron said with a cold expression. As the time waited, Aaron silently looked at the very quiet place they were in, feeling a slight air of nostalgia. I wish everything could be so peaceful forever. What did you say? Daniel asked in bewilderment. Looks like they're already here. Let's make this quick so we can get back and have an early dinner. Aaron got out of the car and waited silently for the opposing side to show up. A black van pulled up not far from where Aaron and Daniel were standing. After a while, a brown-skinned man got out and walked in their direction. Are you the Weasel men? He asked with a cold expression. Yes, that's us. Daniel replied casually and said, we came for the package. It was pointed out to us that time as priority. The man looked at Aaron for a moment, spit on the floor and pulled out his phone. Weasel, you sent 2 of your men? You know this money is very important, you mustn't lose it. Yeah, I don't give a shit if you trust the people you sent, it's fine. Aaron watched all this in silence. No matter what he thinks now, he knows these men are dangerous and he had to act with extreme caution. But even if he was in a situation where he could lose his life in seconds, he felt no emotion, as if this did not influence him any kind of fear. 2 brats who can barely wipe their snot, put the packs down, the man shouted with slight anger. The car parked in the distance slowly moved forward and 2 more people got out. From their expressions, it was obvious they were high as hell. Pop the trunk. Aaron was acting normal, looking at the suitcases. In total there were about 6 of them. Walking towards the trunk, he watched as everyone was arranging the backpacks carefully. Hey, check the backpacks and make sure everything is in order. Aaron looked at the man standing in the distance. What do you want me to check? There, it looks like one of the suitcases is open. After saying that, the man approached with quick steps and Aaron took the moment to plunge a knife into the man's throat. Slash. When Aaron attacked this person, he felt nothing and quickly his next movements were natural. Without pausing, he attacked the other man who was drawing his gun with difficulty. You son of a bitch, you fucking traitor. In a matter of seconds, 2 men were killed. Turning his head towards the remaining man left, Aaron walked over matter-of-factly and said, well, looks like you're out of luck this day. The man who watched as 2 of his companions were killed, looked at Aaron and quickly pulled out a gun. Bang. Cut. Just before he fired, Aaron had run at the man and stabbed him several times in a row. The knife in his hands moved naturally, as if he was familiar with cutting flesh. Was it that easy? Thinking about what he had just done, Aaron picked up a weapon from the ground and turned his head towards Daniel. He knew he had to eliminate the witnesses. Was that part of the plan? Daniel looked at the men on the ground. His body began to shake as he saw what had just happened. I'm sorry, Daniel, but I have to ensure my survival. After saying that, Aaron pulled the trigger and fired. Bang. Grabbing the suitcases in the trunk of the car, he returned to the black car and pulled them back up. Looking at the guns on the ground, Aaron decided to take them. In this world, if you don't kill, you will be killed by these kinds of people. He knew he had to be a cold person, and the faster he is familiar with that way of thinking, the easier it will be to survive in the future. Seeing the corpses on the ground, Aaron felt nothing and got into the car. He had to get out of this place before someone alerted the police to the sounds of gunfire. When he started the car, he left the place quickly. Knowing how to take advantage of the situation and knowing the future, he would make very good use of the money that was gifted to him. Now relaying local news. According to our reports, this morning more than 3 dead bodies were found inside a bridge in Atlanta. This case was too suspicious. Surely a dispute broke out between 2 criminal gangs. This is very common in the outlying parts of the city. According to the police, the case happened last night and details are still under investigation, so it is inconvenient to reveal much about this case. Our reporter Antonio Sanchez will take you firsthand to the scene. In a motel room, the news was on TV. The bathroom door was ajar and the sound of the shower could be heard. The sun shines on the bed through the curtains. This should be a very warm image, but because of the metallic sheen reflected from the various weapons and equipment placed next to the bed, it induced an icy air. While inside a bathroom, a young man in his 20s was looking at himself in the mirror. With an oval face, messy black hair and amber eyes, and although his age was not much, he gave the impression of being between 20 and 25 years old, not at all the age he really was. Aaron approached the bed with a bathrobe around his waist and pulled several large backpacks out from under the bed. Money. Most of the backpacks were filled with greenbacks, and a few others with guns. He had taken a big risk yesterday, but surprisingly he didn't feel scared or nervous, as if what he had just done didn't mean much to him. This world was very cruel. If it wasn't for the walkers that would very soon flood the streets in this world, Aaron wouldn't be so desperate to prepare for the end of the world. Nor did he consider himself a hero. Otherwise he would warn everyone about a virus that would very soon strike their daily lives. However, he knew the society and knew that none of that would do him much good. What he needed now was staff and someone who would decide to work with him and survive in this terrible world. Maybe working alone would be best, but considering all the things he needed to do, he was bound to find a small group of helpers. Therefore, the easiest way to find people willing to work alongside him would be on the internet, so now he needed to get a suitable computer to work on. In an urban area of Atlanta, there are beautiful tall buildings standing, and the roads on both sides are full of people and traffic. It all seemed so normal. It was unbelievable that a virus was about to strike this world and wipe out the governments of the strongest countries in the world with its lethality. From time to time, ambulances passed by quickly. Even if the environment is extremely noisy and normal, Aaron could not remain calm. After all, this world would very soon be in chaos. Will this place be the right place to buy a computer? Looking at the large shopping mall with crowds of people coming and going, Aaron wondered to himself with some trepidation in his body. Let's make it quick. Aaron wasn't very calm in places with large crowds of people. Even though he's not afraid of the plot walkers, a single mistake could cost him dearly. Just as he was about to look for a store where they sell computers, a loud noise was heard and he turned his head to look in the direction of the commotion. He quickly saw a large, dark-skinned man kneeling helplessly at the side of the mall entrance, his chest heaving and panting violently, his whole body trembling, the blood vessels in his eyes showing an unnatural color, and red blood overflowing from his mouth, a series of symptoms that made him look very frightening. Everyone around him knew that this person might have some kind of infectious disease, and everyone covered their mouths and noses and stayed away from this area. Sure, to the people in the vicinity this man was sick and needed help, but Aaron didn't feel the same way. Call the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. We should request him to send an ambulance. What happened here attracted the attention of the police patrolling nearby. Aaron saw them quickly approach with a walkie-talkie and request an ambulance. When they ran to the large dark-skinned man, they quickly handcuffed him without explanation. This action by the police aroused strong discontent among the black-skinned men around them. Those with good tempers persuaded the police to remove the handcuffs quickly, while those with bad tempers cursed aside. The policeman looked coldly at the crowd around him, drew his gun without explaining the situation and silently warned the people around him not to do anything radical. After a while, The ambulance stopped next to the police with the sound of beep 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 beep, not far from the scene. At this moment, the big black-skinned man seemed to have lost his mind. His body was writhing and he kept screaming loudly. It was then that the people insisting that he be let go stopped. Obviously that black-skinned person was very sick. Many even believed it was rabies. Soon, many people arrived and extra manpower was needed to place the man on a stretcher. When the ambulance left, the crowd of onlookers saw that there was no excitement and gradually dispersed, and the usual street scene resumed, as if nothing had happened at this point. Witnessing this whole process, Aaron suddenly became very alert. There was a voice in his ear that seemed to tell him that everything had started. Quite possibly, the CDC had already reported strange cases of a deadly and very infectious disease that was emerging around the world. Why do I always have a sinister premonition? Aaron shook his head. Everyone was running out of time and he had to make the most of what little he had left. Even though this sort of thing happened every day, he shouldn't dismiss every little thing that happened in the surroundings. People are not ignorant, they just have too many problems in their lives to pay attention to the problems around them. If something is coming, they just wait for it. Aaron didn't waste any more time. He quickly found a store where they sold computers and went in without thinking much about it. Now he had money, so he just had to buy a computer and get out of that place. At first glance, he looked at a Toshiba laptop that seemed to look good. Just as he was about to pick it up, a voice next to him rang out. I wouldn't buy a Toshiba laptop if I were you. The equipment is horrible. I recommend an Asus A52F. They are the best on the market in my opinion. Huh. Aaron, who was surrounded by anxiety, immediately turned his head to the side and looked at a young man with glasses and a backpack hanging from his right shoulder. You look like you know computers. Do you want to make a few bucks configuring this equipment for me? I can do that, although it would be money wasted. I'm Aaron Darcy, you can just call me Aaron. Aaron introduced himself to the young man who looked no older than he was. Come to think of it, he could use his help in setting up the computer much faster. Tyler Thorpe, it would be my pleasure to help you in your introduction to the world of technology, Tyler said with a wry smile. Then I thank you in advance, I will definitely pay you well. After paying for the purchase with cash, Aaron got to know Tyler better, this boy who was studying computer science. In his words, he could use a computer effectively by making use of all its capabilities, something not many people do with their computers. It was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon when Tyler finished setting up Aaron Darcy's laptop. They were in a coffee shop not far from the mall and everything seemed quiet. Aaron and Tyler chatted quietly. So, you come alone from abroad just to study, it should be really hard, right? Aaron asked with a somewhat thoughtful expression. I don't have much of a relationship with my parents. After my mother left my father married another woman and now our relationship is somewhat difficult. Tyler Thorpe was very candid and shared part of his life matter-of-factly. Aaron Darcy, who hadn't had much interaction with people since discovering he was in the world of The Walking Dead, wanted to consider Tyler in his plans. Can you help buy stuff online? Aaron noted. I want to get a lot of stuff as soon as possible and in order not to waste time, I want to do it online. It will be difficult because of the delivery time. What kind of things are you buying? Tyler quietly sipped his coffee and asked. Important stuff for the end of the world, do you think you can help me? Aaron handed $500 to Tyler and waited for his response. Definitely the other party noticed his strange and hurried behavior, so he didn't expect much from this outcome. It's nothing illegal, is it? Tyler's eyes narrowed. Of course not. Then you have my help. Let's go to my apartment. This place isn't good for comfortable talking. When Aaron led Tyler to his apartment, he entered curiously. At first he didn't think the other party would be so trustworthy, so he was intrigued. Aaron thought his time would be well spent if Tyler helped him. This person seemed to be very intelligent and thought differently than ordinary people. Sit anywhere you like. Aaron found an armchair to sit on and looked at Tyler. He hesitated for a moment and asked, if I told you that something very big was about to happen, would you believe me? Tyler's movements stopped. He looked at Aaron and asked, do you know about that thing that's happening in France? Know what? Aaron's eyes narrowed. This time he was taken by surprise. About the virus that slipped out of the hands of a group of scientists in France. On the hidden network a lot of information of that kind circulates. When I looked at you I immediately knew you were acting strangely. So, you mentioned buying things for the end of the world. The most interesting thing is that you gave me $500 when it's impossible that someone my age was looking for a person to help him with his laptop. How did you find out about that news? Do you also think it's true? Many debate that the data is false. Tyler Thorpe looked at Aaron curiously. Lately, due to the vacations, he immersed himself in the net and discovered this not so reliable information. You are someone very observant. Your skills could be helpful. Do you really want to know what is about to happen in the world? Aaron's expression was calm. He didn't care what others knew. He was definitely not the only one who knew that the world was slowly going into a bottomless abyss. Let me explain what I know. Tyler Thorpe listened to Aaron's words carefully. He had been wandering the net and had heard a lot of things from others. Some people even went to the extreme and began to prepare in case a serious epidemic breaks out. Even if Tyler wants to buy supplies, he has no money or resources needed to make it happen. Now with a stranger with the same thoughts by his side, he wants to join him to at least calm his restless thoughts. On the other hand, Aaron came to the conclusion that Tyler was not normal. An ordinary person would have scoffed at the words he had just said. He did not know if this was because he already knew something about a disease that has recently escaped them or something else. However, Aaron was not too surprised. In fact, he had already had relationships with people who were not normal long before he remembered details about their past lives. He recalled a vague experience cutting up some kind of giants with swords. Although the memories are still vague, he had some awareness about everything incredible that had happened to him. Therefore, he now deeply believes that this was not a dream and was about a real past life. Every man has fantasized about visiting incredible worlds full of fiction, but Aaron can say that his travels are anything but incredible. Without paying much attention to the past, he concentrated on working for his future. Now he had learned a lot from Tyler and knew he was speaking the truth, so he decided to confide in someone to make it all go much faster. Having finished telling him a little information about a kind of virus that could endanger everyday life, Aaron began to narrate his plan to be forewarned and informed. After a long time, Aaron together with Tyler brought the backpacks he had in the car. This money will be the key to initially prepare the resources. With these funds we can hurry up and start making preparations. That's a lot of money. Tyler looked at the money and weapons inside the backpacks. He felt a tingle inside his body, but he didn't back down. He knew something big was happening in the world. I was able to get this money. We can move with it and start buying a lot of things for the future. Oh. Aaron looked at Tyler's expression silently. He wasn't stupid and would trust this person he had just met completely. Now with the money in his room, even if he refused to help him, he would be involved in the trouble he could cause him. Therefore, he was not uneasy about what might happen. As they put away the weapons and equipment, Aaron and Tyler were planning what they should do next. Not long after, a black van pulled up outside the apartment building. Aaron and Tyler first went to some remote places in the suburbs of Atlanta and quickly rented some houses long enough, then went to all kinds of food markets, supermarkets, pharmacies among other places. After that he started buying seeds of easy-to-grow food, drinking water, tobacco and alcohol, rice, oil among other things. Canned foods such as dried meat, instant noodles, vitamins of all kinds and common medicines that can be bought without a prescription. During the process, Tyler suggested renting warehouses instead of houses. However, this proposal was rejected by Aaron. As to why not to rent warehouses and supermarkets are naturally the first places that are raided by the survivors in the last days. Then, Aaron with Tyler's help spent the days placing all kinds of materials in batches inside the basements of various places and hid them very well. Aaron can guarantee that if ordinary people come, even if they turn the house upside down, it would be absolutely impossible to find the supplies he hid in these places. All these places were marked in detail on a physical map by Tyler. They could not forget where the resources were under any circumstances. Of course, not all the important products are in one house. After all, you can't put gold in one cave. In the end, with Tyler's help, Aaron bought a lot of weapons and ammunition on the black market and hid them in batches. So far, the preparation of materials at the initial stage is almost completed. During all this time, it has been more than half a month since Aaron came to this world and joined Aaron's body from the past. He didn't know how to explain that feeling, but if he had to relate it to something, it would be like waking up from a very heavy dream. Now, because he doesn't know the exact time when the chaos of the end of the world will break out, Aaron moved on and never wasted time, thinking of new things all the time. Things like resources and supplies were finished first, because there are even more important things to be done. The only thing that can't be determined now is the exact time of the virus outbreak. I don't know how much time I have left before the virus outbreak. It looks like I'll have to go to the CDC once to find out. Aaron knew exactly what he was going to do next. So far, everything was proceeding in an orderly fashion according to his sudden ideas. Now, together with Tyler, Aaron climbed into a van and headed for the CDC in Atlanta. Half a month later, at the CDC building, a man and a woman were standing by the windows. Jenner, to be honest, I don't have much hope for this Project Wildfire. We're running out of time. Edwin, You will definitely succeed. You are the most capable pathologist I have ever met. If you give up like the others, there will be no hope for the world. The man named Edwin Jenner approached the woman and held her hands tightly, hoping to instill courage in his wife in this way. You know me, I'm not going to abandon my husband no matter what the results are, right? Edwin Jenner smiled indulgently and gently hugged his wife, who, knowing everything they were going through, leaned on his shoulder, and the two of them just stood there in silence, enjoying the tranquility that moment brought to their hearts. We'll make it, Candace, we'll definitely make it, Edwin Jenner murmured. Candace stood up and grabbed Edwin by the shoulders, her tone turning serious. Edwin. A lot of people are planning to leave now. Since we plan to continue, the next thing to do is to keep a group of people as much as possible. Let's act separately. You go get Jonathan's group, I'll go convince Tiana's group. We have to try to get them to stay and continue working. Edwin Jenner was in a trance, but was awakened by Candace's serious tone. Looking into his wife's steady eyes, Edwin quickly sorted out his thoughts and nodded without showing any strangeness on his face. Just as Edwin and Candace parted, there were two people on the top floor of a building across the street from the CDC watching them with a telescope. These two people were Aaron and Tyler. Dr. Candace Jenner's face was clearly visible in the lens tube. Looks like the time for action is not far off, Aaron thought silently. Is this really a good idea to do this? Tyler asked with a worried expression. Well, the risk will be taken if we make it through. Aaron had been watching the CDC for many days. In the first 3 days, Taylor took it upon himself to thoroughly investigate the interior and exterior of the CDC. He was also able to obtain an access card from a certain employee who left the site, and even managed to research the location of Dr. Edwin Jenner's home to learn more about this person. Over the next 10 days, Aaron installed monitoring devices in the home and cars of these individuals. This was all made possible by black market profits and Tyler's skills in looking in the right place. As long as you have the money, you can really buy anything. I'll start moving. Stay close according to plan. Aaron put away the binoculars, quickly ran to the edge of the roof and jumped. The building's height of over 5 meters seemed insignificant to his eyes. He reached out his hands and gripped firmly on the handrail of the escape passage on the outside wall of the opposite building. Damn, I should learn how to do that, Tyler muttered as he made his way down the stairs from the building. Using both arms, he turned around and Aaron landed firmly on the stairs to the next floor. He quickly made his way down to the second floor, and in less than 20 seconds he was sitting in the driver's seat of the van, at which point the van was parked in the alley between the two floors. He pulled out a notebook, and wrote down the details he discovered and began to calculate what was next. It looks like Project Wildfire has reached the last stage, and the CDC people will also start to leave, so the plot will start very soon. Aaron, looking at the information on his watch and what had been going on, today June 27, 2010 time 6:50 p.m. It's been about a month, I don't know if my father noticed I disappeared. Aaron was a little distracted when he thought of his alcoholic father from this world, but it was only for a moment. He knew there were more important things to take into account right now. He still had to face reality. As for why this seemed to be his third life, there would still be plenty of time to research everything carefully in the information he had gathered so far. Focusing on what he had to do, Aaron waited for the time for the departure of these two scientists from the CDC. While Tyler was doing other things, it was time for the staff to return home. At this moment, a black car was driving toward the exit down the street where Aaron was waiting. Buzz. When the target appeared, Aaron also started his car and followed it. The oncoming car was the Jenner's car, and Aaron's van followed closely behind them toward their house. Regardless of the results, he knew he had to do something today. Aaron thought for a moment. In the end, that was all that was left to do. Finally, when the other party was almost home, he began to pick up speed. Boom. Aaron's van slammed into the back of the Jenner's car and then swerved to the right. Startled by the sudden blow from behind, Edwin Jenner turned to his wife and asked, "Candace, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Edwin, who confirmed that his wife was fine, sighed with relief. Never having been in a car accident before, he knew these things could happen and was thankful that a bigger problem wasn't coming. Then, to check the situation, Edwin got out of the car and saw that the front of a black van behind the lane had badly hit his car. What happened? Although he knows that accidents can happen, he felt that now was not the time to go through so much trouble, wanting to solve this problem as soon as possible. When he approached the driver's seat of the black pickup van, he saw a man lying on the steering wheel. He rushed to check the condition with some concern. "Are you all right, sir?" Looking at how everything had gotten out of control, Aaron seemed a bit embarrassed at this point. Due to his poor control, he hit the steering wheel, He had a small wound on his forehead and blood was flowing down. Although this was within the realm of possibility, he adapted well to the plan. Edwin Janner helped him out of the driver's cab, and his wife Candace had also climbed out of her car seat. Due to being rear-ended by Aaron's van, they were both slightly dazed, but unharmed. At this point, Aaron indicated that he was not feeling very well in the head. His performance should be among the best he will ever do. He looked at the Jenner's car with his hands on his forehead and looked at all the damage he had done to the rear bumper of the car. At that moment, Edwin Jenner saw that Aaron appeared to be okay, and the panic in his body gradually disappeared. Then he looked closely at the damage his car had received. "Oh God, my car. Sir, I'm so sorry. Just now I turned my head and increased speed without looking ahead. Due to my mistake I collided with your car unexpectedly. I'm sorry. Don't worry, I will take responsibility to help you fix the damage I caused." As he apologized, Aaron Darcy's expression was very sincere, and his slightly nervous and apologetic tone put the Jenners at ease. "Look, it's okay. The important thing is that we all feel fine. You don't have to worry too much. Are you feeling okay? I see your forehead is hurt. Do you need an ambulance?" Candace looked at her husband and interjected, "No, too much trouble with an ambulance." Edwin was originally a little angry, but seeing Aaron at this point, his anger subsided a bit. Candace knew her husband very well and knew he shouldn't be too angry, so she tried to think of a solution. Aaron quickly waved his hands and said, No, hospitals are a problem and there is no need to worry. I will go home after buying some medicine. Do you know if there is any pharmacy near here? Take a detour because of traffic, so I don't know where there will be a pharmacy nearby here." Candace looked at Edwin, who understood what she meant and nodded slightly. Seeing this, Candace said to Aaron Darcy, "How about this, me and my husband are doctors. If you don't mind, come to our home and we will give you the medicines you need. Our home is not far away. Your injury doesn't look serious. Once you treat it, we can come to an agreement about the accident." It worked. Thinking of all the possibilities, Aaron silently celebrated the significance of this small achievement, but his outward expression did not change. "I really appreciate it. Coincidentally, I also have some knowledge in treating injuries." After finally coming to an agreement, he climbed into his damaged van and followed the Janner couple after everyone had checked that things were in order. Having moved on to the next plan, he texted Tyler. "Aaron Darcy. I'm heading towards the Janner house. Everything went as expected. Tyler Thorpe. I really didn't expect you to manage to meet up with them. I thought you would be about to use violence. Aaron Darcy. I can handle myself. I'll talk to you later." Arriving at the Janner home, he entered the house with a curious look on his face. After receiving the medicines, Aaron treated his wound briefly, all done quickly without showing an expression of pain. Looking around the Janner house, he found that it was no different from the reports he had studied. The decor seemed to be of good quality, which showed how well they were doing in their work for this married couple. With his good observation, Aaron saw that most of the books on the shelf were on virology, pathology as well as some famous books by renowned scientists. "You live in a great house." Arian couldn't help but praise. "Thank you. Although the house is very messy. We're both too busy with work and don't have the time to clean it." Just then, Candace walked over with a cup of freshly brewed coffee. Edwin Jenner sat down on a couch across from Arian and said, "Have a cup of coffee, the only thing to drink in this house, so that's all we have." No, you've already given me plenty even if I caused you all this trouble." Aaron held out his hands and accepted the cup of coffee and placed it on the table in front of him. At all times he showed himself to be very kind and grateful. He needed to reflect a friendly demeanor. Candace also placed a cup of coffee in front of her husband, sat down next to him and said to Aaron, "Sir, are you sure you are okay? Although the hospitals may be a bit in chaos now, is it really not necessary to go to one?" Hearing this, Aaron smiled slightly and noticed that the scientists in front of him seemed to be very cautious about hospitals, and said, "If I really want to attend a hospital, I must hurry, otherwise the wound on my forehead will heal before the doctors check me." Haha, a very funny joke. You seem to be very optimistic. I was taken by surprise by your joke. Don't worry, I know my body very well. Also, don't address me as sir. I'm Aaron Darcy, you can just call me Aaron. My name is Candace Janner and this is my husband Edwin Jenner. Edwin, who had been silent most of the time, suddenly spoke up. Aaron, you said you had a medical background. May I take the liberty of asking if you are a medical student or work in a hospital? Hearing this question, Aaron knew from the other party's expression that he should be in a difficult situation, so he said without hesitation, "I don't work in any hospital and I'm not a student. I used to be in the army and learned first aid, Then I worked in a company as a security guard after I was discharged from the army. Later, I went back to my grandfather's farm to do some farming work, and occasionally helped some people with manual labor. Of course, many workers and close neighbors would come for medical treatment. Amazing. You really are someone versatile. Haha, it's just some hobbies after moving away from my old jobs. Edwin Jenner was silent for a moment, looked at Candace and suddenly said as if he had made up his mind, Aaron, I know we just met for unwanted reasons, but I want to ask you a very serious question. If it's about the car, don't worry, although I can't say I have any money, I can take responsibility for the damage I've caused you. Aaron waved his hand and expressed how concerned he was about the damage to the car, and he was deduced to take responsibility. Edwin Jenner smiled slightly, but then pointed out, no, it's not about the car. Aaron, what you mentioned is very interesting. I know that the military still has skills even after being discharged from the army. I heard that you worked for a security company. I don't know if you were interested in working like a security guard at our job. Edwin. Candace suddenly realized what her husband wanted to do. She turned to look at Edwin with surprise and whispered, Edwin, what are you doing? Candace, don't interrupt me yet. Aaron, can you answer my question? The CDC is rapidly losing many of its workers, in Atlanta at least. Quite possibly only Edwin and Candace would be left as the last scientists try to find a cure for the deadly virus. Therefore, they urgently needed some people to take over the manual labor. On the other hand, Aaron was taken by surprise. He did not think that everything would develop this way. His purpose was to take care of these two scientists so that they would discover a cure. He knew that their existence could become very important for the future of this world. In addition, the place where they worked, there seemed to be no staff or survivors when Rick and his group arrived, so it would be a perfect place to shelter at least the first days of the chaos. Knowing what Edwin Jenner wanted to do, and if he wanted to take care of this pair of scientists, he had to get into the CDC, so Aaron had already considered this problem. I rarely have a job at the moment. I heard from some former army buddies that they are recently being deployed to many places around the country without much explanation. So I would be happy to work as a security guard. I have some friends who have skills in both computers, medicine and electronics technicians. Do you have jobs for us? We would be happy to get employment. I haven't done much lately. Really? So, can you briefly describe your field and your coworkers' fields? Edwin Jenner's expression instantly became very pleasantly surprised. He looked at his wife and nodded his head in apology to Aaron Darcy. Sorry, Darcy, can you give us a minute? After saying that, without waiting for Aaron to respond, he led his wife into the kitchen. Aaron didn't move, but instead pulled out his phone and texted Tyler. Aaron Darcy. Listen to what they say, nothing must escape you. Then he waited in silence for the couple to return. Across the way, in the kitchen, there was a slightly heated discussion. Candace, I think we should hire outside staff for the CDC. Edwin, have you lost your mind? He's just a civilian now and we don't know much about him and the people he recommended. Do you want to trust strangers you don't know for the first time in your life? Does that matter? You know how terrible that virus is. It's only a matter of time. Once the virus reaches a certain degree of infection, unless a vaccine is developed, the next thing we face is a full-scale outbreak. Even civilians, in such an emergency situation, make decisions without much concern for the outcome. We must also take special measures. The most important thing is that we know we have no security or helpers now. Today we were rejected by all the workers, right? Even our team members decided to quit and go to their families. How much time do we have left? 10 days, 5, or is it today when the chaos will start? After saying that, Edwin massaged his forehead and said, you know the chaos that will start if we don't manage to stop this virus. The army will take over. Martial law all over the country will hit the streets, and even then it doesn't ensure that the contagion will stop. There was silence in the kitchen for a moment, then Candace began to speak in a strict tone. All right, then go ask him. Whether Aaron agrees or not, don't force it. Edwin Jenner sighed, his face full of helplessness. If the virus breaks out full-blown, where would be the best place to escape the infection? Aaron in the living room read the messages that summarized the talk that the Jenner couple was having in the kitchen. After reading the messages, the Jenners quickly left the kitchen. Candace smiled in apologetic mode toward Aaron. Aaron, I'm not feeling very well. I'll retire first. Edwin would like to talk about some things with you. That's okay, Mrs. Jenner. You can call me Candace. Got it. Candace. Aaron stood silently to the side, waiting for Edwin to share what was on his mind. When he learned that he wanted to hire him as Aaron's CDC staff, he silently celebrated this great news. In the original story, he knew that at least the Atlanta Aaron CDC had no staff, besides the Jenner scientists, There was no one else working there in search of a cure. Therefore, it would be a good place to begin future plans. As far as he understood, Aaron knew that Edwin's wife, Candice, was an excellent researcher. If all goes as he intended, he fully believed that they could find a cure sooner or later. Edwin Janner sat across from Aaron and thought carefully about what to say. Aaron, can you explain to me in detail the group of companions you recommend? You must know that this is very serious, because what I want to tell you next is very important and is likely to be related to the survival of all human beings. After saying this, Edwin Janner thought Aaron called him crazy. To tell the truth, there are very few people in the world who would believe him if he said that a virus is spreading at great speed in the world and this would cause an immense amount of deaths. Mr. Janner, to be honest with you, what you told me made me nervous, but I'm willing to listen to whatever you have to tell me. Aaron knew that whether he could succeed today would depend a lot on his next words, so he also tried to act normal and give an impression of honesty. As for the team who could work together with me and whom I have confidence in are 6 people besides me. One is excellent in computers. There is someone who is a specialist in electrical repair. Another one has knowledge about medicine. Another one is a mechanic and knows about electricity. Lastly, there is someone who knows about explosives and another is excellent in driving. Aaron in all this time had not wasted time. With much difficulty and analysis he recruited 5 people. The important thing is that they were all former soldiers willing to work, and now they were waiting for the next moves that Aaron was going to order. With ingenuity and a lot of planning, Aaron with the help of Tyler posed as a secret group that needed experienced soldiers to carry out a top-secret mission. Most importantly, 5 of the 10 selected accepted the job. Many of them had no family, and for those that did, some lived overseas. Therefore, Aaron told them the information he knew and they began to take precautions. With fake IDs, they managed to convince the ex-soldiers, and now you could say he had an experienced group of subordinates. Edwin Janner's eyes became more lively and he felt happy that they at least listened to his words. Aaron, I didn't expect you to have such a good group of people. They could all be of help if we work together. Saying that, Edwin Janner went to the door of his wife's room and knocked softly. After a while Candice came out of the room with expectant eyes, walked to the living room and sat down. Aaron, let me tell you what is currently happening in the world. We are scientists who work at the Aaron CDC. In the following week, Aaron and 6 others joined the Aaron CDC officially with the help of Candice and Edwin. Now all the Aaron CDC members are in panic, because everyone may know some undisclosed news in advance, for which there are already many people who started to make plans in advance and plan to leave with their whole family in search of a shelter. Of course, some people still decided to stay, including the Janners, Aaron and his group along with a few other people. Originally, Aaron was with his team and was a security guard. When he had the opportunity he wondered that since Project Wildfire is in progress, researchers from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention are not supposed to leave. When he told Candice about this question, Candice's answer was very simple, one sentence. We are human too. On July 5, 2010, Aaron and the staff of the Center and Disease Prevention noticed that since yesterday, the news had begun to report violent incidents in various parts of the country. Aaron knew full well that the end of the world was near and all he could do was wait. It was a good choice to trust your words. It looks like the situation out there is starting to get out of control. I hope they find a cure soon. Sam Valdez, a former soldier who was hired by Aaron, expressed his thoughts. Let's not be so calm. Things can go wrong even in this place. We must pay attention, as Aaron said. Tyler, who was manning the security cameras, pointed out. We all know that. We all owe a lot to Aaron for carefully explaining to us everything that is happening. George Bercia said. We need to focus on protecting this place. It will be paramount that they do not breach the security of this very important site. John Seda held up his gun and spoke coldly. Billy Fisher, who was more relaxed than everyone, said, well, now more than ever it is comforting to not have family to worry about. By the way, Gonzalez, how is your family overseas? They will be fine. Aaron helped me with the resources to move them to a farm away from society. I am grateful and anxious to get the job done right. Saying that, Nicholas Gonzalez left to patrol the building. All of them were the small team Aaron could muster. They were more than enough to get around. On a certain street in Atlanta, a van passes by on the street. He arrived at a religious community shortly thereafter. The somewhat stocky black-skinned man got out of the van. He got out and pulled out a large amount of basic necessities, including food, water, and then divided everything equally, and then moved it from housing to housing. T-Dog, you're here again. I'm really bothering you. T-Dog, can you help me fix my TV? T-Dog, God bless you. You're a good boy. Be careful on your way back. The black-skinned man, who was known as T-Dog, was Theodore Douglas. Today is not a community service day, but the streets are not peaceful these days. There are more and more violent incidents recorded on the streets, so he was concerned about lonely old people. Even if he has limited time capacity, he still works with his colleagues. In his spare time, he drives around in his van and passes through various communities, hoping to help these poor elderly. Okay, Mrs. Maria, I'll be there in a minute. After working in the community for an hour, T-Dog finally finished his work and drove his car again to prepare supplies for the next community. At the same time, on the other side of town, Andrea and Amy were driving to a lake to fish. Suddenly, something slammed into the side of the back of their car, and there was a bang. Andrea's heart squeezed. She slammed on the brakes and looked back unconsciously, only to see that the back of the car was empty. A short distance away were two people struggling to run forward. Yes. Amy was listening to the song with her headphones on. When she was jolted by the sudden break, she couldn't help but scream and turned her head to look at her sister angrily. You scared me. Andrea looked left and right for a moment, then turned to Amy and said, Did you hear that just now? What? Amy didn't hear clearly, so she took off her headphones and listened to Andrea continue talking. It sounded like something hit the back of the car just now. Amy was surprised when she heard the words. She stroked her hair unconsciously and looked around in panic, because that violent incident seemed to be very frequent on the streets, and it was so quiet at this moment. Amy's hand holding the seatbelt couldn't help but tighten. It seems that the streets are not safe recently. Let's go fast. Good thing our father gave us a gun for protection. Let's get going. Wow. Glenn was riding his scooter, wearing a baseball cap and his work uniform, down the alley. Pizza delivery has given him an intimate knowledge of the streets and alleys of the city of Atlanta. Basically, each delivery is much faster than others. This is also the main reason why the stingy boss never dared to deduct his salary. Glenn quickly arrived at the delivery place. He deftly parked the scooter, picked up the food and went up the stairs. Boom, boom, boom. Sir, the pizza is here. Knock knock knock. Sir? Anybody home? After waiting outside the door for about 2 minutes, Glenn exhaled helplessly, with a helpless expression on his face. It seemed that the boss's scolding was inevitable. Green shook his head and was about to go downstairs when he suddenly heard a dang sound behind the door. He was so happy that he went back to the door and knocked on the door. Ah woo, pum. Glenn didn't wait for the door to open, but heard a strange low growl behind the door, followed by a rhythmic knock on the door. Glenn stuck his ear to the door and knocked again. Ah whoa. The sound of fingernails scratching at the door reached Glenn's ears. Sir, I know you're inside. If you insist on not opening the door, I'll call the police. Boom. 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 As if Glenn's voice had irritated the person inside the door, suddenly a more violent rumbling was heard, accompanied by an inhuman roar. Glenn was a little nervous and felt that something was wrong at this moment, and he also wanted to retreat, but he said loudly as if to embolden himself, Okay, I'm leaving now. Ah. Tross. Glenn finally panicked, turned and ran downstairs. Beep beep. The number you dialed is temporarily unavailable. Try again later. Damn it. Glenn helplessly put his phone away and drove his scooter into the store. King County, Rick's house. Mom, is Dad going to be okay? Carl, your dad is a very strong man and he's going to be fine. In Carl's room, Lori was lying in bed with her son in her arms. Rick's sudden shot came as a shock to the family of 3, but it made Lori suddenly realize the importance of her husband. Mom, can I sleep with you today? Honey, Mommy's not going anywhere today, you can sleep. His father's sudden serious injury made young Carl feel very sad. At that moment, after worrying all night, his eyelids feel heavy and he soon fell asleep in Lori's arms. At this moment, Lori, who was hugging Carl, felt very sad and finally revealed how worried she was about her husband. Early in the morning the sun began to shine outside a King Country hospital. At this time, Rick Grimes was lying in the hospital bed, his eyes were closed and he was in a comatose state. It had been 3 days since the shooting, so Rick did not know that yesterday the outside world was undergoing tremendous changes. At this moment, Aaron was in the CDC control room with his group and the Emergency Action Advisory, issued by Washington, D.C. was playing on the television. Looks like it's time to act, Aaron thought to himself. He knew that after the onset of the apocalypse, the security of the CDC was reinforced by military and barricades. Tanks and guns were set up on the outside whose purpose was to minimize the advance of the walkers. But he also knew that when the situation became untenable, hundreds of corpses were strewn all over the pavement and the place was practically abandoned. At least within the first 10 days, Aaron was aware that security at the CDC would be safeguarded, but then the outside would no longer be safe, and that is when he had to be prepared. For now, his authority inside the CDC was not much, and that prevented him from acting freely, so by then, when the security was under his control, he could do as he pleased and be practically the leader of this area. And by then, he needed to be ready to receive survivors and have a high store of memories that he had previously prepared. "Get your gear ready. We'll have to move very soon," Aaron said directly to the others. Understood. No one knew what was going through Aaron Darcy's head, but as they well knew, if there is a person smarter than the others, there is no need to challenge or contradict him. The smart thing to do is to follow his instructions to the letter. After seeing how chaos was starting in the outside world, all the soldiers who were recruited by Aaron decided to do as he said. "Aaron, what exactly are we going to do?" Tyler knew Aaron much better than the others. He was the one who practically contributed to all the plans that Aaron had made. Hearing this question, everyone in the room looked at Aaron. They didn't mind knowing what they had to do, but it would be good to prepare mentally. "The resources that we gather we need to bring closer to the CDC. As much as it pains me to say it, right now my authority is not the one I want, but later that can change, and for now we need the resources to keep this place safe." Without waiting for more questions, Aaron didn't look back and walked toward the lab to share his plans. Now, the Janners and Aaron sat in the office next to the lab. The couple looked at Aaron with serious faces. They could not understand why Aaron wanted to leave. The current CDC is arguably the safest place in the world. "Aaron, is there something special you're going out for? Are you going to save your family like the others?" Edwin Jenner was very puzzled. When they persuaded Aaron to agree to come to the CDC together with his team, the other party did not mention his family, so now Edwin thinks the only reason is because Aaron collapsed. "Edwin, Candetsa, I have no family in this place. I have my own reasons for leaving this place along with my team, and not only are they my reasons, but it is also to keep them safe. Let me tell you my plan in detail." Aaron frowned, looked around, walked over to a glassboard, picked up a pen and wrote down energy, supplies, experimental subjects, weapons, time, and then spoke. "Over the past few days, I have taken the liberty of checking many places in the facility. In terms of energy, fuel reserves are not bad, but we don't know how long we will stay here. Even now it is unknown whether they will be able to develop a cure. So, in order for me and my team to keep this place safe, we must move. If the weather persists for a long period of days, the fuel reserve is a big problem." After saying that, Aaron paused and pointed out, "Edwin, you will go look at the overall power supply system and cut off all areas of fuel supply that are not needed. You have the ultimate authority in this place, and that can save a lot of fuel. The supplies are the second most important thing. I know that the facility stores food according to its total capacity. I mean, we are a little over 15 people in this place, where originally there were hundreds of people in the past, so now we can hold on to that food for a long time. However, the same problem remains. We are unsure of the timing and safety of accomplishing what is being done at this location, so if it fails repeatedly, we will definitely have to abandon this location and seek shelter elsewhere. By the time that time comes, it will be relatively difficult to find food reserves." Speaking eloquently on this point, Aaron paused for a moment to let the Janners take in the information, then continued his explanation. "Then there is the lack of current experimental subjects. The center needs more experimental subjects. This is an urgent problem that needs to be solved. What do you think?" When the Jenners heard this, they nodded in unison. They never thought all those details were considered in Aaron Darcy's mind. They considered him a versatile person to rely on, but would never imagine him to be so visionary. "The last thing is the stockpile of weapons. This is also a special point. If we pull out of this place, the food reserves are not enough to keep us safe. We also need to have enough weapons to protect ourselves, and this is just a research center, so a large amount of ammunition is needed to train them. So, long story short, someone has to go out and do all of these things before the epidemic fully breaks out, and the only people here who can do that are me and my team. So what's your opinion?" The Janners still didn't know what to say about Aaron Darcy's detailed remarks. They both looked at each other, but could only see the importance of the other in their eyes, so Candetsa spoke up. "Aaron, what you did is something we have not taken into account. After all, the virus research alone has kept us extremely busy. Let alone the cure, there is no telling when full research on the virus will be conducted." After hearing these words from his wife, the look in Edwin's eyes obviously dimmed, but he quickly raised his head and said solemnly to Aaron Darcy, "Aaron, I'm very happy that I chose you to join our group at the beginning. I'll shamefully leave these things to you and your team. We'll also work hard to do our job well." Of course, Aaron didn't just go for supplies, but he couldn't tell the Janners this. He just flashed a relaxed smile. Don't worry, my team and I are a bunch of retired soldiers, don't forget that. Candetsa also smiled, stood up and gave Aaron a hug. Edwin also stepped forward and gave him a firm handshake by way of farewell. We're counting on you. I also hope you can develop a vaccine as soon as possible, and I will help you with what I can when I return. After Aaron finished speaking, he pulled a walkie-talkie from a pocket in his vest and handed it to Edwin. Don't tune the channel, I'll radio them when I get back. Also, before I return, do not open the door to strangers. Each of you cannot be replaced. You are the only researchers in the center, your lives are very valuable. Okay, you need to pay attention to your safety. I will, I'm leaving now. Edwin, remember to check the power system. I'll take care of that. Edwin nodded, turned and walked towards the subway power supply system. When Aaron finished his explanation here, he walked to the room where his team was and said, "It's time to move. Get your weapons ready and don't forget to wear masks when we're outside." We got it. Tyler, in light gear, looked at Aaron and asked, "Hey, Aaron, do you think I'll be of any help to you out there? I'm the only one who still doesn't know how to use a gun right." Aaron looked at Tyler and said, "I'm not taking you as a soldier, you'll be safer by my side. Besides, you're the one who pointed out the spots where we placed the resources." Tyler kept silent and said no more. He thought he should familiarize himself with this environment, so he mentally prepared himself. John Seda looked at Tyler and said, "Don't worry, young man, we will take care of you." After everyone was ready, Aaron walked to the door that led to the station's subway garage. The person left in charge looked at a group of 7 people with black masks on their faces and unconsciously stood up straighter and waved. "Open the door." "Very well, Mr. Darcy." Behind the CDC is a large automobile garage. Right now, a tactical car and several vehicles are parked in the garage. If outsiders look at this place, they will definitely stop to look at a particular vehicle. A modified RV was parked quietly on a corner. This RV truck was modified. Its front has increased its fender angle. The windows have been reinforced. The wheels have been modified, bulletproof glass and a modified interior to optimize the space. On the outside it has been reinforced and a large fuel tank and a trunk were installed at the front. The roof and a space in the mezzanine port was converted into a shooting port. It had the best engine on the market, which made it a very powerful truck, but Aaron did not plan to take this vehicle when he went out this time. This car that he prepared with great care will stay in the CDC garage for some time. Aaron and his team drove past a motorhome and arrived at a CDC space bus. They stowed all the equipment in the rear compartment and all climbed in. George Bercia, who was the expert driver, climbed into the driver's seat and Arian sat in the back. Removing his mask, he looked at everyone and said, "This time we will gather some of the supplies that were prepared for this situation, then move on to make other targets before returning." Looking at Tyler, Aaron noted, "Point out to Jeroge the locations he will move to next." "Yes," replied Tyler with a somewhat nervous look. As for the others, they all remained silent. Pulling out a walkie-talkie and pressing the button to communicate, Aaron spoke into the microphone. "Z's, Edwin. This is Aaron, we are about to leave. Please remember to keep strangers out. The changes that will happen on the outside will be beyond your imagination. Z's. I will be back as soon as possible. Z's. Arian, take care of yourself. Over." Aaron said no more. He believed the subtle influence in the last few days had made Edwin and Candetsa more wary of the trouble ahead. When Jeroge started the engine, he drove under Tyler's directions. After Aaron understood the rules that must be followed when being a security guard inside the CDC, he learned a lot about the place and was able to observe the Janner couple up close. Soon enough he would learn that the outside security would be owned by the military, but that would not last for long. The stay of the military security to hold the walkers was minuscule and they would eventually leave the place. Therefore, it was a matter of time before he would be the leader and make the best decisions for the survival of his group and future. During his time at the CDC he also tried to locate the people who would be Rick Grimes' group. He planned to try to bring them much later to the CDC before all of Atlanta became an undead paradise. However, it is obviously impossible to find them all and tell them that he is from the CDC and that they were selected to be the only civilians to be saved from the end of the world. But this was only his passing thoughts. He knew that in times of crisis he had to beware of desperate people and very carefully he had to accept people into his group. He did not need a cold dagger among his ranks who might try to cut him down when he slept, just as he did not need a lot of useless personnel. If you are valuable, they will have a future. Value later on will make a change between good and bad. Laws will very soon lose their value and humans their humanity. Hard times create strong and evil people. This was something Arian had to pay close attention to. If he wanted to create a strong and stable community, he needed to know everyone's capabilities and study them closely. As for the Janner scientists, they would be the most valuable people within his protégés. They would be the ones who would most likely find a cure for the virus. As for how Candetsa dies in the original story, Erin knew that at some point she ended up getting infected with the zombie virus and decided to donate her body so that her husband could find a cure. It was this that caused Edwin Jenner to lose the willpower to continue researching, so at that point the hopes of humanity were lost. He couldn't let that happen, so he had to get back as soon as possible once he gathered supplies. As Shane takes Lori and Carl to a shelter in Atlanta, it would be time for him to meet the other main plot characters, and that would only happen long after the apocalypse began. In other words, Erin first needs to return to the CDC to ensure the safety of the facility and the Janners along with other investigators, and then head out to pick up Rick's group. Don't misunderstand Erin's intentions. He doesn't care what happens to Rick's group. He is doing this to get valuable people he can trust. He knew they were just looking to survive and protect their own with all their might. This is something he can't be sure with other survivors. Of course, they won't be the only ones to be saved. As for what Erin and his group were doing at the moment, he had given it a lot of thought. Currently power, weapons, food and security is something the CDC center is not lacking, but in the future there will be a lack of power for generators and weapons for security along with ammunition. The next step in Erin's mind is to bring everything he had gathered during all this time to the center to start training everyone who was part of his group. This way everyone will be more skilled. George Bercia drove under Tyler's guidance to the farthest resource storage point of the CDC. Road conditions along the way were good, probably due to the violent incidents and the emergency action advisory that has been looped on TV and radio these past few days. People still don't understand what is going on, so most of them are at home waiting for the follow-up to unfold in the military to act. However, this provided Erin with a comfortable ride. When he arrived at the site, George Bercia brought out a fuel tanker that Erin had prepared long ago, and then the others began moving the other resources to the CDC bus. The supplies Erin bought were placed in places where there were relatively few people, and usually not many crowds gathered, so there was no need to worry about that in this period. That also the reason why he did not hide it as well the resources as in other places and simply moved the boxes with the help of the others. In another place not far from Erin, Andrea and Amy were saying goodbye to their father by phone. Little did the sisters realize that this goodbye would be forever. Andrea, you must take good care of your sister. You are her big sister. If I am not around, you must act like a mother. Andrea and Amy's father spoke earnestly into the phone. Dad, I'm not a child anymore. I don't need her to take care of me. Amy was a little annoyed by her father's words and stopped paying attention to him. Haha, yeah, you're not my princess anymore. Andrea and Amy's father scoffed at Amy's childish behavior. He knew that his daughter's relationship wasn't very close, so he suggested this trip to bring his daughters closer together. Andrea also smiled slightly at Amy's behavior. Andrea, it hasn't been quiet outside lately. Every day there is gory news on TV. You and Amy should be careful outside. Try not to move around too much these last few days and wait for the news. Dad, I will. I'll take care of Amy, too. You don't have to worry. Of course I'm relieved. Andrea and Amy's father smiled at his daughter's words. Soon after, the sister duo drove down the road without any hurry. Andrea. Huh? Isn't that a big CDC bus? Why are there CDC staff in this remote place? Doesn't it look fake? Andrea looked in the direction of Amy's finger, and sure enough, she saw a group of people in intimidating gear and masks on their faces with the CDC logo on their arms and vehicles. As soon as the steering wheel was turned, Andrea drove there. Hey. Excuse me, is there something going on around this place? Andrea originally wanted to ask if it's safe to drive through this place. None of the people seemed to have their faces uncovered, so she approached to ask. Are you stupid? Why would you ask her something like that? Keep quiet. There must be something serious going on if they're so sheltered. Andrea whispered to her sister when she heard the words. No, they don't seem to be doing anything. In fact, Erin had figured out that a car had been heading in their direction for a long time, but the weapons and resources had already moved towards the bus, and he didn't care if the other party noticed. Looking back, Erin found Andrea and Amy, who had stopped not far away. What are they doing here? Arian Darcy was a little puzzled and then walked over towards the car. What's the problem? Arian Darcy pretended to act like her role warranted and asked. Hi, I'm Andrea. This is my sister Amy. They seem to be members of the CDC. Could something bad be going on around here? It's nothing serious. We're just picking something up around here and we'll be right back. Well, They seem to be busy, so I won't bother them. When Andrea heard Aaron say that nothing was going on, she obviously knew something weird was going on in this place, so she prepared to leave. Andrea, right? Aaron, who had just turned around, turned his head, took off his mask and called out to the two sisters, hesitated for a moment, but didn't decide to tell them directly what was going on, so he changed his words. The situation has been a disaster recently. I recommend you not to stay out too long, go home quickly. Thanks for the reminder. Andrea extended a hand out the window, waved to Aaron, indicating that she understood, and then walked away. Aaron had originally intended to warn the two sisters, but on second thought, even if he didn't mention it in the end, they had continued down the road, so they were sure to meet up with the others in the end. All set, boss, said Billy Fisher. After loading all the supplies at this point, they all boarded the bus while someone else drove the tanker. Aaron ordered back, and after unloading the weapons, resources and leaving the truck, he communicated with the Janners before turning to drive away to the next point. In the afternoon, Aaron and the others were resting on the bus, and the urgent action notice was still playing throughout the day on the television. Aaron was not interested in what was being broadcast on the television. The only thing he was interested in was when the TV signal stopped and the internet stopped working, so he could confirm the progress of the plot. Maybe it was just thinking about it, but the image on the TV started to flicker, became increasingly blurry and finally stopped transmitting. What's that? We have the best signal here. Tyler looked at the blurry TV and stood up to check. After checking the TV, Tyler changed all the channels on the TV one after another and none of them had a signal. Looks like it all went to shit, Billy Fisher muttered in a somewhat nervous voice. Aaron looked at his watch. It was 5:30 on July 8, 2010. The end of the world has officially begun. Aaron got up from his seat, put his boots back on and ordered, "Let's get moving. It looks like the situation just got worse and we shouldn't waste any time." In the next 9 days, he needed to transport part of the many supplies to a hidden location near the CDC facility. If it is a week later to consider transporting supplies, it will become very problematic. At that time, a large number of refugee claimants will go to various locations, which will cause traffic to come to a standstill. Of course, with the bus and the official authority that your group has, it will not be a problem to move anywhere you want. In the last few days, as Aaron took the time to pick up supplies at the farthest reaches of the CDC, there were gradually more vehicles fleeing down the streets and people in general sensed that something was wrong. Although the television signal was gone, the radio was still blaring, telling citizens not to go out, not to have physical contact with violent people. The outside world did not stop for a few days, but intensified. Many people ran out of food at home, and when they went shopping, some encountered violent situations. Criminals taking advantage of the chaos. There were even shootings in many places. Many families who had never experienced these things finally could not take it anymore, packed their things and planned to evacuate. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed since the talk of violent attacks and bloodied people on the streets of Atlanta began. With the oppression of what was going on in the world, many places began to put up circular walls around virus-free counties. Now the authority of the streets belonged to the military. They were making the rules and they were unceremoniously eliminating the infected. During this period, some people have packed their luggage and are ready to enter the quarantine area at any time. Some people have already found a hiding place and moved all supplies early, waiting for the army to enter the quarantine area. Feeling extremely worried, many opted to leave everything at home, and leave the city with their families and whatever supplies they could find. It was 12:39 a.m. on July 18 at Rick's home in King County, Atlanta. Lori was standing in the doorway at this time, talking to Shane in a low voice and turning her head from time to look at Carl, who was reading comics in his room. "Shane, what do you mean by leaving here?" Lori couldn't understand Shane's words. Under no circumstances could she leave her home and abandon her husband who was now prostrate in a hospital bed. "Lori, calm down and listen to me clearly. The city is in total chaos now. The bastards at the police station have pulled their families out to take refuge elsewhere." After saying that, Shane held his head and pointed out, "This morning we received a transmission from Atlanta. It said that a temporary shelter had been set up in Atlanta. The people on the streets are infected with some kind of virus that makes them act strange. Haven't you seen those people? They eat people. Those crazy people aren't human anymore." Shane told Lori what he had seen and heard in a slightly nervous tone. All he could think about now was taking his good friend's family and hiding somewhere safe. "What do you mean, viral infection? Cannibalism?" Lori looked at Shane with a pale face, covering her mouth in disbelief. "Yeah, you think I'm lying to you? Trust me, we can't stay in this place any longer. We have to get to Atlanta as soon as possible. Shane put his hands on Lori's shoulders and looked straight at her. What about Rick? My husband is still in the hospital. I'm going to the hospital again tomorrow. I'll bring Rick back. Pack your bags tonight. Get some food and water ready. Hey. Lori. Hey, I'll keep you safe. Trust me. Okay. Okay. Bam. Fucking bitch. Who told you to bring this crap? We need food. Why the fuck are you bringing these fucking pictures? Sorry. Ed, I'm going to fix more food. Carol covered her face, got up quietly and went to the kitchen again. Sophia, go get me a beer. While half lying on the couch, Ed yelled to his daughter, whose face was only half exposed outside the room. Sophia cringed and said submissively, okay, Dad. After taking the beer his daughter brought him, Ed shouted back at the kitchen door. Carol, hurry up and get ready. We're leaving tomorrow morning. I can't stay in this damn place, damn it. Sophia shuddered and ran back to her room. Similar scenes played out in countless families, some consoling each other and some blaming each other, but they all happened to pack their bags and set out for the nearest municipal institution. Bang. 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 Ah. Help. Ah. The first ray of sunshine the next morning is accompanied by gunfire and shouting in the streets of King County. If anyone looks down from a great height at this time, they will find that the city is completely chaotic, with messy streets, thugs everywhere, panicked civilians and numerous soldiers on the road. Shane drove early to the hospital where Rick was, but found that the front of the hospital was already protected by many soldiers. Whenever there was a conflict in the surrounding crowd, the soldiers' bullets would get them immediately. The order received should be to clean up even all the infected people, and those who have been in contact with them. The hospital is the first choice for the vast majority of injured people. This should also be the reason why after Rick woke up, there were so many body bags in the hospital yard, and there were also traces of a large amount of military forces stationed near the hospital. Having said that, Shane didn't know this at the moment. In his eyes, the current soldiers were slaughtering civilians. God, the world is crazy. On the other hand, Aaron during all this time had gathered plenty of supplies and all that was left was to gather test subjects. At this time, a bus with the CDC logo had parked outside the King County Hospital. Aaron, inside the bus, put on a mask and held his assault rifle and looked at the people watching him. You know the plan. We will take some subjects who have not yet lost their minds and bring them to the center. If you see a person acting strange and violating your security, open fire. The virus is deadly and once they are infected there is no turning back. Shoot in the head and follow me closely. Understood. 5 of the 6 people responded righteously. Being former soldiers, they knew how important it was to follow orders. The first time they saw Aaron they felt that authority in his words that urged them to obey. They had seen demons on the front lines and Arian was one who remained asleep. Tyler and Jeroge, you two will keep watch around. Aaron said, we will keep open communication. If a problem arises don't forget to report it. Don't worry boss, me and Tyler will take care of the transport. Jeroge Bercia said with a carefree smile. Right. Let's get going. Aaron had reinforced communication with the group he managed to put together before joining the CDC. At first he had lied saying he was from a secret group that would be carrying a secret mission to guard a research facility. He also shared the problem that would later be released into the world. Once he joined the CDC the doubts that remained in his mind were erased. This was serious. They discovered much more than was being talked about and they knew that the CDC center was the place where the hope of humanity hung in the balance. Equipped with black tactical uniforms, SEALs and IDs that proved they belonged to the CDC, Aaron would have no problem moving wherever he wanted. It was known that the CDC around the world was fighting against time and their authority was far above any governmental organization. 5 people including Aaron got off the bus on high alert. This place was in chaos and a lot of gunfire could be heard everywhere. Outside control had been placed under the authority of the military in a desperate attempt to contain the outbreak. Stay alert and shoot in the head anyone showing the symptoms you know. Aaron walked naturally forward, not feeling nervous about what was happening. Bang. Sometime after exiting the bus, John behind Aaron killed an infected person with a shot to the head and Demure a woman who was about to be murdered. Then they entered through the hospital door through many corpses lying on the ground. Bang. 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 Aaron and the others continued to shoot and deal with the infected people scattered along the way, and the group of them quickly approached the stairs leading to the second floor. But before they climbed to the second floor, a group of footsteps were heard off to the side and heavily armed soldiers pointed in their direction. Stop. Stand still, and lower your weapons. At the thought that this could happen, Aaron was prepared and took steps forward. When the soldier leading the group walked forward, he was pleasantly surprised by the equipment of Aaron's group. We are under martial law. What is the CDC doing in this remote part of Atlanta? Downtown is a long way from this place. Looking at the soldiers with masks on their faces, Aaron pulled a document from his chest and said, I come for test subjects. It was mentioned that there might be optimal experimental subjects at this location. I am Captain Aaron of the CDC. I have new information about the outbreak. Aaron removed his mask and said, the wildfire virus is a latent virus spread by airborne, and possibly by direct contact, with a 99.9% infection rate. It spreads through the host's blood and concentrates in the central nervous system. Wildfire virus becomes active when the host ceases all vital functions, or when an active agent of the virus enters the bloodstream. The soldier was stunned when he received that information. Looking at the report in the document, he looked back at the CDC credential and said, what's the quickest way to eliminate the infected? Headshots, with a shot or hit that damages their brain is more than enough. Body shots don't work. The soldier nodded and gave a military salute. Thank you for the direct report. I will report directly to my battalion commander. Do you need reinforcements to carry the experimental subjects? No, we'll make it quick and pull out of this place. Aaron looked coldly at the surroundings and said, advise all soldiers of this information, it will be vital for a quicker cleanup. Understood, sir. Sir, please help me. Just as Aaron and the others were talking, and the soldiers were planning to consult their superiors by radio, a figure suddenly stepped out of the shadows. Stand still and don't move, or I'll shoot you. The soldiers did not expect that suddenly other people would run out after this person, and did not bother to contact their superiors. They raised the assault rifles in their hands and warned them not to continue approaching. Aaron had more watchful eyes and looked at many more figures behind the infected person and ordered, Valdez, open fire. Under Aaron's order, Sam Valdez stepped forward and opened fire without mercy. Bang, bang, bang. Under the wave of gunfire, Aaron looked at the soldier and said, the CDC center is still investigating a cure, so you guys need to contain the spread of the outbreak. Got it. Let's go. Arian turned to his people and signaled for them to continue walking. This was one of his reasons for visiting this place. Reaching the second floor, several soldiers were shooting many infected mercilessly. Looking at the people in the corridor, Aaron entered a room and looked at a person lying on this stretcher. Looking at the nurse who was about to run out, Aaron stopped her and asked, is he infected? What? Is he infected? Pointing to the person on the gurney, Aaron asked. He was bitten. For now he only has a fever. Get him ready to move him. As long as you help me with that I can ensure your safety. Aaron looked back and said, secure the subject. Yes, sir. In another room, Shane's heart began to pound as a soldier opened the door. Just as he was about to draw his weapon he heard a voice. This place is fine, we'll take it from here, we got it. As the voice stopped speaking, footsteps could be heard coming through the door and the voice rang out again. Hello, Officer Shane. I'm Aaron, remember me? This person was Aaron. Dressed in a black tactical suit and no mask, he entered the room and looked at Rick on the gurney. Aaron. Yes, I remember you. I met you a few months ago. What are you doing here? Shane looked at Aaron quizzically. From his attire he appeared to be someone in authority. At that moment, a group of civilians were arguing with the soldiers at the end of the hallway, but the soldiers suddenly raised their machine guns. Bang 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 bang. All the civilians were soon down. Shane's face changed drastically when he heard that. He looked at Aaron and asked, do you know what's going on? Officer Shane, we don't have time. You need to get out of this place and evacuate with the others immediately. Aaron said in a serious voice. Mr. Darcy, the test subjects have been selected. Gonzalez said outside the room. Aaron, are you a soldier? Aaron nodded slightly and explained, sort of, I work for the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. I went back today to pick up some subjects that could serve as evidence. What happened to Rick? Is he infected? No, he was shot and is now in a coma. Shane corrected Aaron's confusion. Nurse, give me a status report on this person. At that moment, the nurse who was helping Aaron with the test subjects entered the room and walked over to the hospital bed, did a simple exam and reported. Rick's injury is severe and the site where he was shot is relatively fragile, so it should have caused some damage to nearby internal organs. Judging by the current situation, he shouldn't be able to wake up anytime soon. Hearing this, Shane grabbed his hair with both hands. He looked very irritated and muttered in his mouth. What should I do now? Then he suddenly reached out and grabbed Rick's arm. He shouted in a worried voice, Rick, brother, wake up. We must leave at once. Aaron quickly grabbed Shane's hand and stopped his behavior. Hey, calm down. He needs to rest now, and even if you wake him up, what are you going to do with him? Right. What should I do then? Lori and Carl are still at home waiting to take refuge in Atlanta. I have an idea. Do you have a solution? Aaron paused and then replied, I have some authority at the CDC. I can get Rick to an ambulance and move him, so you can go back and evacuate to a shelter in Atlanta with the people you just mentioned now. In Rick's current condition he should not move casually, but we have enough medical conditions to cure him. I'll get back to you when Rick wakes up. What do you think? Shane's eyes sparkled when he heard those words. This method was feasible, but then he asked, then why can't we go to the CDC with you? In the room where Rick was, Aaron looked at Shane and said, because the CDC has strict rules and my authority is not much. What little authority I have I can use to take Rick, but if I take a group of people to the center, it is possible that even Rick may not be able to get in. Do you understand me? Aaron at first had also hoped to be able to take Shane and the others to the CDC directly, but without Shane, Rick's future group would most likely not be able to meet, so Shane had to take Lori and the others to Atlanta. But this was within his thoughts. First of all, he had to secure a fixed point where his authority was ultimate and he could make decisions without having to look to a superior, and only that way most people would be able to hear him. Alright. I appreciate your help in this difficult time. Aaron, thank you so much. I knew you were a great guy when you stopped that thief. After settling this very important matter in his mind, Shane relaxed a lot, and his tone was obviously calmer. He reached out and patted Aaron's hand. Aaron returned a reassuring expression and remarked, let's move quickly. Help the nurse move the stretcher, we'll lead the way. By the way, don't worry about the outside, just help me get Rick out of the hospital. As Aaron walked out of the room, he looked at two people infected with the zombie virus and said, this place is no longer safe, let's get out of here right away. Shane looked at the soldiers in black tactical uniforms and masks, unconsciously thinking that Aaron had a much higher position than a simple CDC worker. He looked at his friend on the stretcher and started to move. As they moved forward, Aaron watched the corridors and the half-open rooms with vigilance. His gun pointed naturally. When he heard a sound to his left, he moved quickly and fired. Bang! With a precise shot, the bullet pierced the infected person's head, and blood mixed together with the brain sprayed out of the large hole, staining the wall red. The infected person whose brain was destroyed seemed to have lost all power. He lay weakly on the floor and there was no movement. Blood continued to pour out of the wound, forming a pool of blood in an instant, exuding a strong smell of blood. Because these changelings had recently changed, their speed of movement and reaction were much faster than how I had thought they were. Seeing the death of the infected person, the entire body of the nurse pushing Rick's gurney seemed to have run out of strength and collapsed straight to the ground, panting heavily. Don't stop, keep moving, shouted Billy Fisher in a deep voice. Don't look sideways, focus on just looking straight ahead, Shane said. He was more tolerant to seeing these types of scenes due to being a cop, but he was still shocked to see the very purposeful movements of the people around him. Aaron watched all of this coolly. His spirit remained unbroken, feeling absolutely nothing but calm. He had long since learned that he was a cold-blooded person, very determined in his actions to accomplish his goals. Even if he is a walker or not, he will not touch his heart to think about whether or not it is right to take this kind of action. Let's keep moving forward, don't stop, Aaron said before resuming his walk. As Aaron was still walking, he turned to the right and looked at some walkers to his left. Raising his hand, he took 2 steps forward and opened fire. Bang! Bang! Due to the silencer on his gun, the noise was muffled and not so outrageous. 2 more infected people were taken out, their bodies falling weakly to the ground. Let's keep going. However, just as Aaron was about to turn around to continue leading the way, a group of infected people with a hideous face came out of a room in a blind spot in the hallway. Be careful behind you. Seeing the infected people getting closer and closer, Shane ignored his task and shouted tensely as he saw the danger. But the other party's reaction was quicker than Shane's warning. He turned around sharply, stretched out his foot and kicked the chest of the first infected person who came out of the room hard. The unexpected kick caused the infected person to lose his balance and fall to the floor. Then Aaron stepped on the infected person's back, pulled out the dagger and stabbed the infected person's head, ending his life. Looking at Aaron extremely decisive in front of everyone, for the former soldiers who had already lived with him, they looked at him naturally, but for those who did not know him very well, this person seemed to be a person without compassion. Aaron drew his dagger and stared at the other walkers approaching him. Without waiting any longer, he aimed his weapon and opened fire. Bang! 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 Shane and the nurse began pushing the stretcher forward. On the other side, John, Billy, Sam and the others were moving the people who would serve as test subjects from the back with extreme care. "Contact!" shouted Sam Valdez before opening fire on the enemy targets. There were more and more shifters in the vicinity and it looked like the soldiers had left this place. "Turn right," said the nurse in a shaky voice. Under the nurse's guidance, everyone moved safely forward. Aaron led the way without worry. Every time he encountered an infected person he eliminated him with a simple headshot. The road ahead was impassable and there were infected people approaching from behind. Aaron and his group suddenly found themselves trapped and surrounded by infected. "Take them out calmly. Remember, we are in an advantageous position." Aaron did not panic and began to open fire. Bang! 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 As the situation became more intense, Aaron and his group stopped and began clearing the road. They couldn't do anything but start shooting, because the corridor had been invaded by many infected. With the bullet shells hitting the infected, they all eliminated more than a dozen walkers coming out of the rooms and corridors around them. After a while, everyone continued walking down the hallway forward. Shane on his side was surprised, because Aaron was not initially seen to be a guy who leads with a cool and focused mind. "Tyler, we are approaching the exit," Aaron reported over the radio. When they reached the main gate, Aaron signaled Shane to wait a moment and Aaron along with 2 others cleared the way, eliminating the remaining walkers in the vicinity. "All clear. Let's move forward." After a while, the roar of an engine was heard and a bus in an instant specially prepared pulled up in front of the hospital. "How are you guys doing?" Tyler quickly got out and opened the back door of the bus. "All good." Aaron didn't have time to talk and wheeled the stretcher. Rick was on up the back door of the large modified bus. Then the test subjects were successfully loaded and secured. Aaron briefly entered the bus, then turned and tossed a black object to Shane. Shane caught it and saw that it was a radio. He understood what Aaron meant, but then also saw him pull out a backpack and hand it to him. "Shane, we communicate by this method. The channel is pointed behind the radio. Remember not to run out of battery. When Rick gets better and the situation inside the CDC stabilizes, I'll contact you." "Okay. Listen, brother, I really want to thank you for everything you've done. I wouldn't know what to do without your help." Shane's eyes are very sincere at this moment. He is really grateful to Aaron, and he is also happy for his good brother Rick, who unexpectedly met such an acquaintance under such circumstances. "Needless to say, if you want to thank me, you can buy me a drink when Rick gets better." In the backpack are weapons and ammunition. There is also a note with details about the situation and what is known so far. "Have a good trip, buddy. Of course, bon voyage, help me take care of Rick." "Don't worry." George Garcia drove all the way back to the CDC, taking a detour due to the fact that now the road leading towards Atlanta has started to be blocked. Looking at the test subjects that were prepared, Aaron made sure they were properly secured. Meanwhile, the group in general was discussing everything they just experienced. Something unimaginable is happening. Shane, shortly after separating from Aaron and leaving the hospital, picked up Lori and Carl, and spoke briefly about what happened at King County Hospital. Lori was grateful for how lucky she was. She did not expect that a person her husband and Shane briefly met would save her husband's life at such an alarming time. "Shane, when we get settled, we need to thank Mr. Aaron." "Yes. If it wasn't for him, I really don't know what I would have done today," Shane said excitedly as he drove. "Mom, is Dad okay? That man named Aaron is amazing. Is he some kind of special soldier?" Little Carl didn't understand half of what he heard. He only knew that his father was rescued by a soldier and his squad. What mattered most to the innocent child at that moment was which army were the heroes who saved the people. Lori lovingly stroked Carl's hair, secretly sighed thinking her son was still a child, but still had to warn him. "Carl, Mom doesn't know either, but you must remember that when we meet that person soon, we must thank them, understand?" Little Carl nodded vigorously. "Well, I will, Mom." "Yes, you will, Carl." Shane also smiled and bowed his head and said. At this point, there was a relaxed atmosphere in the car. What they didn't know was that the urban area of Atlanta had become hell on earth at this time, and countless people were also frantically fleeing to the outskirts of the city. By the evening of the same day, Shane and the others were stuck on the road, looking at the endless line of cars ahead of them. Many people even stood on the roof of the car, trying to see the overall situation they were in. Lori pulled some pieces of bread out of a backpack and distributed them to Carl and Shane, who discussed the following plan as they ate. At that moment, Carl found a little girl sitting next to him, looking at the bread in her hand. The longing in her eyes could be felt even by Carl, who was only a child. So Carl broke off a piece of bread and handed it to the girl casually. "Are you hungry? I'll give you some of my share," I can't eat that much. My name is Carl. What's your name? The little girl shyly looked at the bread in Carl's hand, took it silently and looked back at her mother. At that moment, the girl's mother also heard Carl's words and turned her head. Seeing this scene, she smiled and said to Carl, "Little boy, Sophia has something to eat, no need, thank you." Lori also noticed this, turned her head to look at Carl and said softly, "Carl, don't disturb the others and eat quietly. It's okay, the boy is nice too. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have noticed that my Sophia is already hungry. Hello, my name is Carol. This is my daughter Sophia, and my husband Ed." Carol always spoke softly, as if she was used to talking like this. Lori nodded amicably when she heard the words and introduced Carl and Shane. Then the two parties were silent, and when she felt embarrassed, Carol spoke again. "Are you going to Atlanta for shelter? Or are you going to see some relatives?" "We're going to a shelter, we don't have any relatives there." Lori shook her head slightly, a depressed look on her face. She thought again of her husband. Carol noticed Lori's expression was wrong. She looked at Shane as if she saw something and randomly changed the subject. "We're also going to the shelter. We should get more people together. After all, no one knows what's going on there. If there are more people, a lot of things will be easier to deal with. You know what I mean?" Lori felt that what Carol said made sense, so she turned her head and looked at Shane. Shane also heard Carol's words, thought about it, and then spoke. "Carol, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. To be honest, I'm a county cop." Hearing the word county cop, Carol squeezed hands hard while the others weren't paying attention, but her expression didn't change one bit and she was still listening seriously to Shane's words. "I think we can use my identity to contact some fellow officers along the way, so that whatever happens in the future, it will be much better than facing it alone." He's right, it's better to act as a group than separately. With a smile on her face, Carol waved cheerfully, then gestured for him to talk to her husband, then turned around and got into the car. Shane for his part looked through what Aaron had given him in the backpack and was surprised at what he found inside. Military food, medicine, ammunition and some guns among many other important things. Aaron was definitely very well prepared and Shane was grateful that he was inclined to help him. City of Atlanta, CDC. After a lot of trouble on the journey, Aaron and his group finally arrived at the CDC, but what he saw made him frown a little. At this moment, at the main entrance of the center, there were many corpses lying from left to right. There were corpses of soldiers and a few other walkers around. Aaron was worried that something would happen to the inside of the CDC, so he abandoned the idea of ordering these walkers cleaned up and told George Garcia to drive to the back garage. How is it possible that soldiers were wiped out like that? John Seda couldn't believe what he was looking at. If the situation had gotten to this point, it was time to imagine the worst. Tyler felt his hands go cold and never thought this whole situation would come to these extremes. No, something seems to be going on. Aaron ignored the chatter of his group and picked up the radio. The soldiers in the vicinity were not numerous, away from the barricades and tanks that should be stationed in this place in the future. Z's. "Edwin, are you there?" Aaron waited for a while, but got no answer. He was anxious and ordered everyone to get ready, leaving Rick in Tyler's care for the time being. Quickly Aaron and his group ran to the central lab. Clear the infected in the vicinity. Aaron wasn't even worried about the noise the gunfire might generate, due to the fact that they all had silencers. "We got him." Everyone spread out slightly and began firing accurately at the slowly approaching walkers. Bang. 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 John, Sam and the others began taking out the walkers. Everyone knew something had happened to the CDC. Just as Aaron was about to enter his id to enter the center, the radio in his chest beeped. "ZZ. Arian. Can you hear me? ZZ. Candetsa? Where are you?" "I'm on the 4th floor. ZZ. Watch out, there are people." Candace's words formed a scene quickly in Aaron's mind, and then he entered his id. As the door opened, the radio beeped and Candace said, "On the 4th floor and in the basement, there are people infected with the virus." After confirming what he feared, Aaron looked back at his group and shouted, "Let's move, an outbreak broke out in the center and there are infected people. We need to clear the place and secure the survivors." Everyone moved without saying a word, but their faces grew grim. After all, this research center was too important. The CDC was not too small, but not too big either. Aaron entered the facility along with his group and took the elevator immediately. "Turn on flashlights," Aaron said in a deep voice. "This doesn't look good at all," Nicholas muttered with concern. "Everyone stay alert." The corridor was a bit dark. Aaron this time didn't decide to use a long gun. Instead he pulled a knife quietly from his waist and Aaron slowed down. Sam Valdez, take half down the other corridor and clear the area. Understood. Sam Valdez took 2 people and they went the other way. Walking slowly to the ground, Aaron heard the characteristic roar of walking corpses, which sounded like they were wandering around the 4th floor. There was a smattering of blood on the wall between the corridors. In the corner of the second room lay a corpse. Judging by the clothes, it should be a civilian. This person was shot many times in the head and chest. It should be that the shooter was not very good at aiming. It took many shots to hit him in the head. At this point, Aaron came to the conclusion that there were civilians who took shelter in the CDC. Aaron and the others just watched briefly and continued walking. They finally ran into 2 changelings at the exit of a staircase on the 4th floor. Shish. Aaron asked the people behind him to keep quiet and quickly closed in behind the walkers. Crack. Poof. The dagger in his hand accurately pierced the back of the first walker's neck and blood splattered sideways. Before the other walker could react, Aaron took it out with a swift movement. Wiping the dagger on the walker's clothing, Aaron opened the stairwell door, probed to observe, and there was no walker down the hallway. Looks like they're all at the cold storage door, Aaron said quietly. Then Billy Fisher stepped forward and led the way. Everyone's here, boss. Billy Fisher and John Seda moved to the sides of the hallway and took aim with their assault rifles. Aaron also raised his assault rifle and dropped to one knee. Looking at the cold storage door in the corridor, there were no less than 10 walkers surrounding the door at this time, and all the survivors seemed to have entered from the other side of the door. Knock knock knock. Aaron, seeing all these walkers, with the barrel of his assault rifle, hit a metal pipe and the walkers were immediately attracted by the sound. When they looked at 3 people they moved in his direction. This is exactly what Aaron and the others needed. As soon as the walking corpses moved from the door, Aaron and his group could easily eliminate them. When the walkers separated from the gate, Arian, who had been in position all this time, said, "Now, open fire." Bang. 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 Billy and John quickly fired at the heads of those infected with precision. The shots were paused and the bullets went through the heads of those walkers. Blood sprayed all over the hallway and in a matter of seconds all the shifters were eliminated with precision. Inform the rest that we've cleared the place. Billy Fisher nodded and picked up the radio. Hey, Sam. How is the situation on your part? ZZ. All is well, wiped out the walkers and there doesn't seem to be any more traces. Let's search well in every corner, we don't have to leave a single one alive. Knock knock. Aaron knocked on the cold room door and shouted, "Come out, we've taken care of the infected in this place." ZZ. Aaron, are you outside? Yes, it's safe now. Click. The cold room door opened and Candace's shaky voice came from inside. Are they all dead? You can come out, it's all over. When the people in cold storage heard that it was safe outside, they finally stopped hesitating and ran out, all of them panicking, their bodies covered in white mist, and their hair, eyes and eyebrows were also stained white from the ice. Aaron and the others looked at these people with a wry smile. They all checked their condition, but Aaron did not look at Edwin and asked, "Candace, where is Edwin?" Candace hugged her arms and quickly rubbed her hands, tried to speed up the blood flow. Hearing this, she tried to say what had happened clearly. Edwin, when the infection spread, he attracted a lot of infected. Edwin could be in danger. After saying a few words, Candace couldn't help but cry. Another researcher next to her, Martha, quickly hugged her and explained, "Many of the infected chased us here, and Edwin suggested we hide in the cold storage." After pausing, Martha continued, "The infected were attracted to Edwin, but unexpectedly, when we closed the door of the room, the sound attracted many of the monsters, and we were also trapped." When Aaron heard this, he knew he had to rescue Edwin Jenner immediately, so he said to the person in front of him, "Billy Fisher, stay with them and make sure of their safety." Aaron looked at John Seda and said, "Let's move, we must find Dr. Eden." Billy Fisher nodded and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of this place." After Aaron and John Seda left, the investigators did not immediately go to a safe place, but began to check the corpses in the vicinity, and soon one of them shouted, "Oh, God! Did everyone figure it out? These infected were killed with a head shot. Did they know that their weakness was the head? God! Don't scare me like that. How can they even think of screaming in a situation like this?" Billy Fisher held his gun tightly, thinking that a walker had been resurrected. After calming down, Billy pointed out, "Well, Arian told us that as long as we shoot the brain, we can take out any living thing regardless of whether it was infected with the virus." Hearing what this person said, everyone looked at the corpses and found that there were no wounds on any other part of their bodies, so they were pleasantly surprised. Candace suddenly said. Aaron mentioned that he was a soldier before. All the security people who joined at the last minute are former soldiers. We should just be thankful for how capable they are. Let's keep these samples as much as possible, they are still valuable. Billy's eyes bulged as these investigators began moving the corpses around like candy, ranking the corpses from best to worst. This is shocking. Under Billy's care, they all loaded the corpses together after hearing Candace's words, but they were still arguing quietly. When they learned that the guards who had not been seen for many days were former soldiers, all the researchers could not help but feel a sense of security. Having such skilled people on your side is definitely comforting. Even if this shouldn't have happened, now with people protecting the facility, everyone was able to work calmly. Sam, there's a very valuable scientist we need to find. As Aaron and John ran through the corridors, he reported over the radio. Got it. We'll move quickly. Under Aaron's orders, everyone quickly searched the entire place. Although Aaron and John ran fast through the corridors, they were able to quickly make out Edwin's escape direction. The footprints of the infected on the wall and floor were visible. Turning from hallway to hallway, they finally heard the sounds of walkers moving. Let's get rid of the infected. Aaron held up his jump rifle and as they turned around they fired. Bang. 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 Under the bursts of gunfire, the walkers walking to the front fell in ranks. The other walking infected heard the noises behind them and changed direction. As the infected turned around and began to approach Aaron and John, a volley of bullets were directed at the infected. But these shots could be heard clearly, so that weapon producing the fire had no silencer. The shots rang out for nearly 2 minutes, during which time the firing would stop for a moment only when the magazine was changed. Aaron and John stepped forward carefully, fired several shots at the remaining infected, and then advanced, sticking close to the wall. Edwin. Are you there? I'm here. All clear, you can come out. There was a muffled sound followed by an exclamation in the room, followed by the sound of tables and chairs moving. After a long while, Edwin Jenner opened the door, grabbing his head. By this time, his clothes were dirty and he still had an M4A1 on his shoulder. Aaron and John were a little speechless. They looked at the gun on Edwin's body and pointed out, "You have a gun. Why run away? If we don't come back right now, would you be stuck with just a gun in this place? Even with a gun I could have cleared these infected." John looked at the scientist with a smile. Obviously his words were in jest and pointed out, "I'll have to teach you how to shoot. You're too valuable to let yourself die for these pieces of dead flesh." Edwin Jenner was a little embarrassed, scratched his head and said haltingly, I don't know how to shoot. But none of us can shoot. We fired more than a dozen shots in the stairwell before we killed one. I spent a lot of magazines before they arrived, but I'm happy to be able to shoot a gun, feeling the recoil stimulate my muscles." Aaron was too tired to speak. At that moment, Edwin suddenly seemed to think of something and grabbed Aaron's arm, his tone quickly turning to panic. Edwin Jenner, in a panic, pulled Aaron and ran in the direction he came from, without properly explaining what was going on. Candace and the other researchers left at the center are hiding in the cold storage. When I was running away I seem to have seen many people infected with the virus in front of the door at that time. Quickly, let's go save them. Wait. You have nothing to worry about, everyone is safe right now. Edwin Jenner was completely relieved now to hear Aaron's words and together with John they all walked towards the cold room. On the way, Aaron picked up the radio and communicated with the others. They still had to get the people that were left outside before anything else happened. When they arrived at the cold storage, Candace was the first to see Edwin approaching and rushed to hug him. The others also looked at the two with a smile and came over to hug him one by one after the two were separated. Seeing that everyone had finished greeting each other, Oren asked Edwin directly, "Okay, tell me what happened here. Didn't I tell them not to open the door when we weren't here? Their safety is very important. They can't take that risk if there isn't someone capable of maintaining security inside the facility." John Seda added with a serious expression. Edwin smiled wryly. Weren't his efforts enough to prove that he could keep this place safe? The scene of the infected eating other people left a throbbing fear inside everyone, who saw death flash past their eyes in seconds. They definitely wouldn't take a risk like that again. "It has nothing to do with Edwin. I was the one who opened the door." Candace picked up the pace of the conversation and expressed an apology to them all. "I'm so sorry. If it wasn't my fault, what happened now wouldn't have happened and jeopardized our entire future. No, you made the decision we all agreed on. No one would have thought such a thing would happen." After listening to Martha's explanation, Aaron realized that a group of people had arrived at the CDC to ask for help just when some soldiers were facing some walkers. Everyone present hesitated for some time, and finally it was Candace who decided to let them in. What was not expected was that all those people came into conflict long after they opened the door, and not everyone went straight into the center. The conflict seemed to be that there were different opinions within this group of people, and some people wanted to occupy this place, while the other group did not want to do anything. The two waves of people began to attack each other. Those who wanted to occupy this place were blocked outside and attacked by zombies. Edwin and the others closed the front door, but many of the people who entered the center had already been killed, and some others were severely wounded by the area where they were husbanded, and the few unharmed people were also infected soon after. Later, it was discovered that many of the other parties on the outside had not moved. When they went to check, the corpses that were infected turned into walkers and chased them. In panic, they were all chased into the cold storage. The rest Aaron had already speculated, so he didn't pay much attention to it. The walkers outside were many of those who remained outside. People can be dangerous. The whole group of people lamented what had happened and arrived at the main hall. Just as they were about to start cleaning the place, there was a noise outside. Ta-da ta-da. A group of people immediately looked out the window, only to see a squadron of helicopters flying not far in the sky, and a heavily armed force slowly approaching down the road further away. What are these troops for? These investigators stood by the window and looked out warily. Looks like the soldiers outside were just a reconnaissance squad. Looks like the main force has arrived now, Aaron thought to himself. As he looked outside, he figured out what would happen next. I knew very well that these troops were going to establish a temporary base outside the CDC to receive some survivors who were evacuating and keep the place safe. As for the follow-up, there should have been a relevant transfer plan, but this temporary camp was eventually destroyed by a large number of walkers. Aaron had been confused when he looked at all the corpses and some bodies of soldiers outside the CDC. He thought at first that the soldiers should have arrived earlier, but he never imagined that soon after he arrived at the CDC so did the soldiers. Thinking ahead, Aaron did not get too complicated, and now what he had to do was to check the whole place well to maintain security inside the center. Not long after, Tyler along with a nurse returned to the lab, pushing an emergency bed at the same time, and Rick was lying on the bed. The others also brought in the bodies that would serve as experimental subjects. These subjects were tightly secured and moved into the lab. Arranging a room, the nurse changed Rick's medicine and left the room. The Jenners walked toward them and Aaron explained without waiting for the other party to ask. This is a friend of mine. He was shot and that was about half a month when he was in a shooting with crimes. He is currently in a coma and by the nurse's words he has no symptoms. I will take care of him, there is nothing to worry about. The Janners looked at each other. They didn't have much to say. They themselves had put the center in danger a moment ago, so they could only voice their thoughts. Well, now that the CDC rules and regulations are useless, I guess it's a good time for your friend, but he needs a blood test. No problem, you can have it done as soon as possible. Alright everyone. Let's rest early today, you guys are tired too. Go take a hot bath, rest and let's continue with the investigations tomorrow. After saying that, Candace shooed away all the staff that had been working on the cleanup. Aaron in all this time had been checking every nook and cranny of the CDC along with his group looking for stray walkers. He could not sleep without going through every corner of the place at least 3 times. Although several people were very tired at this point, they were still busy with the job at hand, so they were a little reluctant to leave. Many were still in front of a microscope and looked like they had no intention of resting at all. Alright for today, listen to Candace and get some rest. This day was full of strong emotions, Aaron said with a slight smile, seeing that everyone was trying so hard to look for new clues in this zombie virus. When he arrived at this place and toured it, he saw that the research room was transferred from the upstairs to the basement, and the electricity was cut off on the upper floors, leaving only the downstairs areas with power. Rick was also transferred by Aaron to a staff room on the lower floors. So far, almost all of Aaron's arrangements in the initial stage of this world have been arranged, and the next step is to wait for Rick to wake up. Aaron left Rick's room and walked towards the stairwell. At the stairwell door, he met the Jenners. The 3 of them came to the second floor window, looking out at Atlanta in the distance with a little light shining through the city buildings. The first to speak was Candace. She looked out the window and murmured, "Is this the end of the world?" Edwin slipped his arm around his wife's shoulders and walked with her in silence. Aaron didn't think much and said, "I don't care if this is the end of the world. If it is, we will bring hope to this world, and as long as we are still alive, we can recover." Suddenly, clusters of huge flames erupted one after another in the distant city of Atlanta, instantly lighting up the originally dark sky. Buildings in the distance became illusory against the backdrop of the flames and were gradually engulfed by the explosions. More clusters of explosions were heard, and the entire city soon became a sea of flames. Are they leaving the remaining survivors? They're sick. Edwin's hand around Candetsa began to unconsciously exert force. Sensing the uneasiness in her husband's heart, Candetsa also reached out and took her husband's hand. Aaron was quiet and said something lightly. We can't change the world, but we can change ourselves. At that moment, the radio in his chest began to make sounds. Zzz. Aaron, can you hear me? It's Shane. Did you see? The city of Atlanta is finished. Now, we can't go to a shelter in Atlanta. Zzz. Aaron, can you hear me? Over. The engineers were startled by the sudden sound and were relieved when they realized it came from Aaron's radio. Picking up the radio, Aaron replied, Copy that. This is Aaron. There are a lot of things to sort out on my end and I can't leave at the moment. I suggest you find a space away from the city not too far away and stay there for a while. I will be looking for you as soon as possible. Over. Zzz. I understand, buddy. I'm reassured that you're doing well. Considering Shane took very good care of Rick's family in the beginning of the end of the world, Aaron was calm and not at all uneasy that something had happened to them. Truth be told, he has too many problems in this place to worry about other people. Most are confused and very few know that this is just the beginning. He had to secure a solid path to take on optimal goals later on. There are so many people that need to be saved that he would rather not think about it. The people that are in his path will have a chance to be welcomed into his care, and if they are a threat, they will not have a good ending. As Aaron was thinking about the future, he heard his radio go off again and a woman's voice came out with a concerned tone. Zzz. Hello, Aaron, my name is Lori and I'm Rick's wife. How is my husband doing? Letting out a murky sigh, Aaron replied, He's doing well. I have placed him in a safe place and he will be under observation, don't worry. Zzz. Thank you, Aaron. Lori's voice trembled a little. She obviously couldn't control the waves of emotions she felt hearing that the one she loves is okay. She paused for a moment and the intercom went off again. Zzz. This is Shane. Aaron, I'll find a safe place as soon as possible. We'll keep in touch. Over. Zzz. Copy that. Check the suitcase I gave you very well and pay attention to your safety. My team and I will pick them up once the situation is under control on my side. Zzz. You too, brother. Over. After putting the radio away, Aaron didn't explain much to the janitor, only saying that these people were also his friends. It seems you're not even used to it when a person thanks you. You show a very peculiar expression when you're in that situation, Candetsa said without looking at Aaron. I didn't know close affection either. That's normal. Edwin spoke for Aaron. Haha. Aaron scoffed under his breath. To tell the truth, when he hears about love and affection he feels an emptiness in his chest, as if those kinds of feelings can't arise inside his body. There is no time for that. When will we die and how far will we go? Thought Aaron without taking much importance to these feelings. At that very moment, on the outskirts of the city of Atlanta, on the highway some distance away, a motorcade was slowly moving towards the city. Dale Horvath was sitting in the driver's cab with his eyes wide open, looking at the rear-view mirror. The huge fireball just now caused his eye sockets to darken, and cold sweat quickly leaked from his forehead. In all his years of life he never looked at a scene like the one that had just occurred. Oh my God, how could they do that? Boom. Inattentive driving often has certain consequences, especially when following another car. Dale's RV crashed into a car across the street. It was a miracle that the speed wasn't too much. The two girls who got out of the front car were Andrea and Amy. However, Dale Horvath didn't notice this and looked out the window toward the city. Due to the commotion, the two sisters paid no attention to this and watched the large explosions go off in the center of the city. The shocking scene caused countless people to get out of their cars and stare at the city of Atlanta in front of them. The fireball engulfed not only a city, but also the homes of countless people. However, unbeknownst to anyone, the explosions were not only in Atlanta, but all over the country like New York, Nebraska, Chicago among many more cities. Half an hour after the bomb throwing stopped, cars on the main highway leading into Atlanta came to a complete stop, and some people began packing up their things planning to leave on foot, while others gathered to discuss where to go next. Next to Dale Horvath's RV, there was also a group of people gathered at this time, including Dale, Andrea, Amy, an Asian kid, a burly black-skinned man, a black-skinned woman, two gangster-looking guys, and a family of 4. Originally, it was just Dale discussing things with the two sisters and other people nearby, but many people came in unaware. Dale was still groaning. After the crowd gathered, it looked like he had found a way out. His eyes were as wide as bells, and the stubble at the corner of his mouth quivered as he spoke. This incident is absolutely extraordinary. Let me tell you, otherwise the military would never have dropped firebombs on the city. This is so immoral. Where are our human rights? Why did they destroy our city? Stupid human rights, man. They don't care about your fucking human rights. What they care about is if you can bring them money, greenbacks. Do you understand? The older of the two gangster-looking men was full of bad language, which caused the people around him to scowl. Can you show some respect, for God's sake? Andrea stood next to Dale and said somewhat reproachfully. Merle Dixon smiled mischievously. Beauty, I hear you. You know why, because you're beautiful. I like beautiful women. An ugly grin appeared on Andrea's face, then turned into a disgusted expression immediately after turning her face. Amy was about to say something, but Andrea grabbed her and swallowed the words. Seeing her sister's expression of forgetting, even though Amy stopped talking, her face was actually full of anger. Dale was also stunned enough. His eyes widened even more and he just looked at Merle Dixon with surprise. Merle said nothing, just sneered strangely, but Daryl behind him suddenly said, I don't care what nonsense you say. Doesn't anyone here want to talk about those damn walking corpses out there on the streets? In my opinion, those people are already dead. Why are they still walking around and wanting to eat people? After saying that, Darlie pointed out, is there anyone here who wants to worry about that? Hearing this, the Asian boy in the crowd stammered about what he had seen and heard. Speaking of which, in the last 2 or 2 days, I came across these kinds of walking corpses. They seem incapable of dying. I saw soldiers shoot dozens of bullets at them, but they can still walk and eat people. Even some of the internal organs had come out of them, and they can still move freely. You said you saw these things the other day, did you, Glenn? The black-skinned, strong-looking man next to him also spoke up. Yes, to be precise, yes, I heard that roar, exactly the same, in a residential house long before all this started. It's a total mess in the city right now. I just hope the army comes to our rescue soon, said the man with the nickname of T-Dog. Don't dream, Theodore, haven't you seen that the army has suffered heavy losses? They are defenseless, otherwise why would they drop bombs on the city? The black-skinned woman next to T-Dog also spoke, and he only heard her continue speaking. I work in the city's Department of Urban Planning. A method like this that completely destroys a city will only be used as a last resort. Jackie, are you saying it's useless to go to another city? Glenn was well aware of the meaning of Jackie's words. Jackie was silent for a moment, then nodded, that's basically it. Okay, let's discuss what to do next. My name is Morales, and this is my wife, son and daughter. I think instead of worrying about this, we should first discuss how to deal with the current situation. What do you all think? The man in the family of 4 next to him suddenly said. Haha. How to deal with it? I'll tell you how to deal with it. Those bastards in the government can go fuck themselves. We, my brother and I were born for this kind of world. We can hunt and survive in the wild. As long as everyone listens to us we will protect them. What do you think? Merle Dixon as he said this lit up a cigarette. As the smoke came out of his mouth he said some nonsense or other, and raised his eyebrows at Andrea with a lecherous grin which made Andrea feel shivers. Just as they were about to turn around and leave, he suddenly heard a deep male voice behind him. I don't think so, and I'm sure people don't think it's a good idea either. This is a tall white man standing behind Andrea. He looked at everyone with a calm gaze. Before anyone could ask, the person who arrived first spoke up. Hi, my name is Shane Walsh. I'm a police officer from King County, a suburb of Atlanta. I just overheard your conversation and I apologize. But I have a lot more information and I have a place to go. I don't know if you're interested? After Aaron mentioned to Shane about the suitcase, Shane found a lot of interesting things that he didn't initially pay attention to. He's a cop. Looks like we haven't been abandoned, ha ha ha. Whispers from several people drew several nearby civilians, trying to hear what Shane was about to say. I'm very sorry. I'm here as just another civilian and I have nothing to do with what will happen in the future, but I can say that I have a lot more information and in the future I don't rule out that someone may come to our aid. As soon as everyone heard him, they felt his words illuminate their dark future and Shane didn't stop talking, but continued. I am a victim like all of you in this incident. My city was in chaos days ago. This time I am protecting my colleague's family. Our car is parked in the back and I couldn't help overhearing their conversation. Just now I understand the overall situation. You see, even though I'm not a government envoy, I'm still a policeman and I maintain contact with a member of the CDC. I can use firearms and as long as I can afford it, I will help you maintain your security while everything is going on. In our current situation, the worst thing to do is to act alone. Only by joining forces can we be able to form a group and act together, find temporary shelter and wait for my friend to contact me. Shane's words were obviously accepted by most of the people present. Hearing that he had a government contact, everyone decided to accept his words. Officer Shane, you are right, but I want to ask you, do you have a place that can serve us as a temporary shelter? Morales is more concerned about practical things. After all, he has to keep his family safe. Seeing that no one objected, Shane felt there was a great opportunity, so he continued speaking to reassure everyone. I know a place, a nearby quarry, that has been abandoned many years ago and the infrastructure has been demolished, but it is inaccessible and few people go there. After saying that, Zana showed a map with the path marked. This was specially prepared by Aaron Darcy. Everyone looked at it and accepted. Audria was the first to raise her hand and said, "Come on, we have to go. It's better than being stuck on this road." Glenn also raised his hand. "I'll go too. I only have food for one day. I can't wait here to die." "Yes, but there is something to discuss ahead of time to find a safe place to settle." Dale also raised his hand, expressing his agreement. More and more people raised their hands in agreement, and the rest did the same. "All right. Now that we have it clear, we need to go back and get ready. We will meet once we are ready," Shane said and looked at Dale. "Dale, get some of us into your RV to try to drive with the least number of cars." Shane patted Andreas' car and continued to tell Dale as he showed him the map. "In a moment, go through this section of road. There is an intersection a few hundred yards ahead. Drive into the reverse lane and then go west. I'll be there waiting for them." Dale nodded. About an hour later, Shane and the others found Dale's RV. Shane signaled for them to follow him and they all headed forward. A group of people arrived at the quarry Shane mentioned, which is a good place surrounded by mountains and trees, and there is a mountain in the center. They all reached the top of the middle and found a relatively flat spot. "This place is not bad. The cop has some vision." Morales got out of the car and walked around briefly, chatting with Darley. "We can wait in this spot while things progress," Shane muttered with a somewhat nervous look on his face. They all began to settle in and start handing out duties. They didn't know how long they would spend in this place, so the responsibilities had to be mutual. In the documents that Aaron left Shane, they detailed the situation of the virus and the hopes of finding a cure. To tell the truth, the future looked very bad, but he had hope that all this would be solved. CDC Center, and the entire society was consumed in a matter of seconds. Jeroge Bercia looked at the buildings in the distance with unfamiliar thoughts. With a mustache and long hair, wheat-colored skin and black eyes, he joined Aaron Darcy when he heard he could be back on duty. Truth be told, he always missed going back to some institution that could make him hold a gun again. The money was too much and the requirements were too credible for him to accept. When he heard what he had to do and after joining the CDC with the others, he thought he was very fortunate to be in this place. Now he had companions and people to talk to. He had the opportunity to keep fighting and that comforted him. Nicholas Gonzalez frowned. This that was happening was unimaginable. He could not react to the government deciding to destroy the city with missiles. If this is happening in Atlanta, it would be the same in other parts of the world. "What is in store for us?" Nicholas Gonzalez asked with a deep sigh. Hearing Nicholas' words, Tyler felt that the situation was truly dire. Given that the government had gone to these extremes, the military had completely lost, right? In a very short time society was consumed by the virus and all indications were that there was no turning back. All we have left is to survive. We have to be strong and grateful. Not everyone has the same conditions as us in this place. While everyone felt scared, many other people just silently watched the situation. The walkers are increasing in number and it was a matter of time before everything would get worse. Scientists were still struggling to find a cure while soldiers continued to contain the virus. The older people lost hope in the world and rested in silence. On the top floor of the CDC facility, Aaron started with cold eyes at the place outside the window, his thoughts submerged in many possibilities. As the sound of gunshots rang out from time to time, his eyes and thoughts delved into what he had to do in the future. The virus called wildfire, or WF virus for short, is reported to be spreading rapidly around the world. It is estimated that security in Atlanta could not be sustained and it is unknown how serious it is in other areas of the country. The World Health Organization, along with elite teams from several countries such as the CDC, are doing everything they can to make the wildfire virus halt its advance, and it is estimated that a vaccine could be out in at least 4 months. The government set up several points where civilians can take shelter. The military with martial law issued will do everything possible to safeguard the safety of all civilians without exception, and will also deal with all those who are infected with the virus or present symptoms that may be related to the disease. The chaos is becoming more and more unbearable. We ask everyone that if you present symptoms or are aware that you are infected with the virus to come forward. You will not only save your family members from getting hurt, but you will also protect the future of the entire society. Aaron was sitting in a chair, his left hand holding a rifle as he looked at the camp that had been set up outside the CDC, one part of him wanting to save the civilians and the other telling him to wait. It has been a full week since the army set up outside the CDC facility. In Billy Fisher's words, they will not be able to sustain security for many more days. But Aaron knew all this from the beginning. After all this time he had made sure of the welfare of the people inside the CDC. If they admitted civilians into the facility right now, it would be unfair to many if they couldn't get in. He couldn't do much for the people outside at this point. Having control of a large crowd of people would cause an out of control in his next plans. It is said that in order to create a new society, you must destroy the old one, and that leads to having many enemies. He had given it a lot of thought, and would only help the military and civilians outside when the barricades were untenable. For now, he just had to wait for everything to come under control and start planning what to do next. This is a mess, isn't it? Hearing the voice that sounded next to him, Aaron looked away and saw Sam Valdez with his hands on his vest. He stood up and walked next to him. When he hired Sam Valdez, he put in his file that he really liked music and chewing gum. His favorite hobbies was healing people with his tiny medical skills. With a robust body, Sam had a lost expression, and his large beard often prevented people from seeing what he was thinking. Looking outward, many families embraced each other with worry on their faces. The soldiers were no different. They all knew firsthand the hell that had been unleashed on society, and all they hoped for was for a cure to be announced. Even if we can't do much for those people out there, we need to broadcast valuable information on the radio about how to wipe out the infected people. When Sam heard those words, he looked at Aaron with surprised eyes. He had seen the innocent expression on Aaron's face. He knew that on the outside he might look like a calm man, but inside he was a real monster. We must keep this place safe. If the scientists discover a cure, all the chaos will end and they can go back to their daily lives. Do you know what will happen next? After a moment of silence, Aaron touched his hands to the window pane and said, "The system will fall and society will cease to be as it was before. Those who can survive will do things that even animals are afraid of. The population will shrink and food will start to become scarce. Cannibalism will begin and betrayal will come from the people closest to them." Saying this, Aaron looked at Sam and held him by his shoulders. "When the time comes, we must create a strong and united society, hardworking and responsible. I hope by then you can help me, Sam. Will you stand by me to the end, Sam? Of course, I will support you wherever you go." At night, when everyone was resting in their rooms, Aaron closed his eyes and began to think about those memories flooding his mind. The memories felt like dreams far removed from any reality, but every morning when his eyes looked at a new day, those memories were reborn in his mind and filled him with feelings so real that they caused him discomfort. He did not remember much of his past life, and the past of that one either. The only thing he knows is what will happen in this world later on, and of the heavy sleep where a new Aaron woke up. Please give me strength to follow this path and create a new world. Aaron during all this time had observed the behavior of the 12 people besides him in this place, what they liked, what they wanted, and their ambitions. He couldn't afford to leave his entire future in hands that didn't suit him. The resources he had gathered and all that effort he had put in, no one could dream of taking away the things that are his. During this week he had interacted in a deeper way with many of the people in this place. He was committed to making decisions and taking risks for everyone's future, promising himself that before he put anyone in danger he would make sure he was the first to walk. His sharp eyes told him that there was no one with those intentions inside this facility, so those thoughts had to slowly subside. Just as he was about to start trying to sleep, the sound of bullets in the distance began to be heard like small firecrackers. Puzzled by the situation, Aaron sat up in his bed and soon after heard the sound of footsteps in the distance. "Aaron, it looks like the military is pulling out of the facility," shouted Sam Valdez in a loud voice. "It looks like the time has come." Outside the CDC, dozens of armed army trucks began to be loaded with supplies and all started their engines. There were more than a dozen armed soldiers who began to climb into the vehicles with a frightened expression on their faces. A few minutes ago, the defenses had been breached by many of the walkers, and shortly after that happened, an infection broke out inside the temporary shelter. "Sir, are we abandoning these people?" a soldier asked with a reluctant expression. "We've done all we can. The defenses of this camp are unsustainable." The middle-aged man did not raise his head after hearing this and kept looking at the map, searching for a suitable place to move to. The soldier said nothing when he saw this, closed the small iron window again, leaned back in the passenger seat and continued to observe the situation outside. What about the safety of the CDC? Is it really impossible to create a cure in such a short time? Shut your mouth, kid. Making this decision fills us all with an indescribable feeling. Don't make that any heavier. In the rear compartment, the middle-aged man in the special combat uniform looked at the soldiers in front of him and said, "All right, if we evacuate by this route we will avoid the main streets. We haven't received any reports from the government for a week now, we can't do anything but retreat. Get moving." Several army cars began to leave the temporary camp and civilians who noticed this began to look for some vehicle to flee. While some soldiers were fleeing, there were others who were giving it their all to keep people safe. "The defenses have been breached, you need to look for vehicles and start moving people up, we need to get out of this place." "Yes, sir." The few remaining soldiers also had solemn expressions when they heard this, and obviously understood that this action was of great importance, and their eyes were full of determination and they responded in unison. Everyone started to move, but they knew this was unsustainable. With the chaos just generated, many people had been infected with the virus and it was a matter of time before everything collapsed. Bang 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 bang. Everybody move this instant. Mama, I'm scared. The soldiers began the standoff and fired at numerous shifters coming in from all sides, but the situation was way out of control. "Marcos, we have to fall back now," shouted a black-skinned soldier with a sweaty face. "Everyone follow me. Let's fall back and find a way out." About 7 soldiers moved in with a dozen civilians retreating alongside them. Looking back further, the temporary bell ringer discovered that everything had been raped by the walkers and many had died in the teeth of those monsters. Bang. Boom. Bang. Switching charger. "Mike, cover me," shouted Marco as he looked at his partner who was far in front of the others. "Shit, this is my last magazine." Mike, the black-skinned soldier, looked at the people behind him with morale at a low ebb. With the army retreating, they had lost a clear line of defense and everything became chaotic. There are too many of them. As they all retreated towards the main gate of the CDC in the hope that he would open the gate, they held out with difficulty and fired at the walkers closest to them. On the other side of the door, Aaron and 5 people from his group stood silently, waiting for his orders. "All right, let's save these people." "Understood." Just as everyone was about to lose hope, the door behind them was opened and a group of heavily armed people came out. As they advanced past the group, they began to open fire on the numerous approaching walkers. Bang 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 bang. "Everybody get inside this instant." Hearing those words, about 11 civilians and 6 soldiers rushed into the CDE facility without much thought. Aaron took precise aim and opened fire on numerous walkers that were slowly approaching towards their direction. He still couldn't believe how the walkers could against the armies and their large armaments. "Sir, everyone's in," shouted Billy Fisher in a loud voice. "All right, everyone stand back." Not wanting to waste any more ammunition, Aaron stopped firing and walked inside the facility to solve a new problem. "Thanks for opening the door, you've saved a lot of lives when that's not your job," muttered the black-skinned soldier. Aaron Darcy looked at the 6 soldiers and the unmoving civilians. "I'm reassured that everyone is okay." "Yeah, it was so sudden." After recovering from the shock, the black-skinned soldier named Mike took a closer look at this small group of people. If they are from the CDC, they shouldn't be so armed. "All right, you will all submit to a blood test." Removing his mask, Aaron said, "Now I'm going to ask you 2 questions, one for the soldiers and one for the civilians." Sensing that something was too strange, Mike and his friend Marco looked at the person speaking. "My name is Aaron Darcy. Under my responsibility I risked my life to save all of you. Now, my job is to keep this place safe and I ask you, will you still be soldiers or will you be civilians?" Aaron looked at the soldiers who had a shock expression on their faces. The emotions they must have experienced hit them hard. "And for civilians, courage is a must in this facility. Nothing will be given to you for free and you have to prove the value that your stay in this facility represents. Do you share my thoughts in believing that we must all help each other? If you want to stop being soldiers you may be civilians, but if you want to be guards you will have to follow my orders. This is an active message to inform you of the latest that has happened in the country. Numerous casualties and defeats are being recorded in an attempt to slow the spread of the virus. From the CDC inform them that once they are infected in parts outside of their limbs it is impossible to reverse the effect. In extreme situations they can immediately amputate a limb that was bitten by an infected person and cauterize the wound. In this way they may end up preventing the spread of the virus through their bloodstream. This is a message from the CDC. Infected people, once their body's actions have shut down, they will cease to be human and will be controlled by an instinctive action of the virus. It is recommended to eliminate these infected people, and the easiest way to do this is by damaging their head. The brain is their weak point. To all survivors, remember you are stronger, faster and smarter than the infected roaming the streets. Your survival is essential for us to get out of this situation. Remember, once infected with the virus, there is no turning back. The CDC is still struggling to find a cure. Please survive and persist through this tormenting hell. Since the recordings were transmitted from the CDC on Aaron Darcy's orders, now the situation at the facility had changed. The 6 soldiers who entered became guards under Aaron's orders. One could say that there were now 12 personnel, including Aaron, with combat capabilities. Some of the civilians joined the group of guards and are still in training. It is estimated that very soon there will be around 20 troops, including Aaron. The other civilians who joined the facility work at numerous sites to keep the place running. Counting the scientists, guards and civilians, there were 37 people in the CDC. Under the regulations of supplies and the proper distribution of food, everything was going smoothly. Aaron had carefully observed the survivors who entered his territory, studied them and even learned their names. After the army left the temporary shelter, many interesting things were left behind that Aaron could not leave behind. Over the next few days he took machine guns, military vehicles, weapons, resources and equipment. It is estimated that the things left behind by the soldiers in an attempt to flee were very beneficial for the future of the group and Aaron. While the remaining walkers were eliminated, the place was cleaned to avoid infections and diseases. After a while the place was completely cleaned and the corpses were cremated. The resources were transported to the 5th floor of the CDC and to the parking lot, for now Aaron's authority was at its highest. Everyone looked at him and believed that Aaron was someone who could do many things that others could not. Just his vision about the future was better, and he was always prepared for any situation that may arise in the future. In the command center, Tyler made sure that the transmissions changed every day so that the people struggling to survive would not lose hope. While everyone eventually became accustomed to life inside the CDC, Aaron was making preparations to receive survivors. From his words, the scope of warnings about a shelter should be short and not long range, this just to control the number of survivors in their ranks. Aaron was very smart and had certain restrictions from now on when receiving survivors and rules that must be followed to the letter. He was not a savior, and if the others wanted his protection, they needed to be helpful in some way. Upon settling into the CDC, everyone must serve a week in isolation while they learn about this place and its rules. If they don't follow the rules or try to cause trouble, they will be expelled. And for those who want to cause more than trouble, they will all meet an all too quick end. In the blink of an eye, almost 40 days have passed since Aaron returned to the CDC. During this period he contacted Shane on numerous occasions and kept him informed about the situation. He also went out several times with the soldiers of new members that joined his group. Today there were 20 people capable of using weapons and who are practically soldiers under Aaron's orders. All of them learned the importance of rules and working to get the benefits they have. The other people who were not in charge of security had other very important jobs, and some more that for now their skills were not useful, such as agriculture, hunting among other jobs. Sorting out all the people here, Aaron was too strict and very observant. Today there were in total 68 people in the facility, and on several occasions Aaron went out with the new group of soldiers under his wings. Every time they came back they always brought resources back. As long as he made sure everything was sustainable, Aaron could keep this group of people under his wings. He knows he can't act alone, especially when it would be increasingly problematic to find reliable people. Although Shane and the others had a hard time in the quarry, they managed to survive. Because it was the beginning of the end of the world, Glenn and the others also had a good harvest in the fringe areas of the city. Aaron had heard that they were planning to go to the center. They had never been to these past few days. Aaron secretly calculated the time. It should only be a few days before Rick wakes up, and all indications were that the beginning of the plot had arrived. But this was something Aaron had ruled out a long time ago. For now he could not afford to consider such factors when he was creating a strong and sustainable shelter. Aaron arrived at the garage and surveyed the numerous cars there. There were 5 Humvees, of which all had machine guns and were functional, 3m1 Abrams tanks and several military trucks to transport people or supplies. The arsenal in Aaron's hands was enough to keep a safe haven. As long as he was careful, nothing bad would happen in this place. Looking at the RV he had prepared and specifically modified, it was ready to go at a moment's notice and had now been fitted with a heavy machine gun. Now, when Rick woke up, he was ready to go meet Shane's group and consider other factors. On a specific basement floor were the staff sleeping quarters. The upper floors had also been set up for people to rest. Rick, who had been in a coma for almost 2 months, slowly woke up. In fact, he was not in a deep coma, but his senses of the outside world were very groggy. He knew vaguely that something happened around him during the coma, but he couldn't remember it after suddenly thinking about it. Almost 2 months of bed rest made his body slow down a bit, but with the good care he had received in this place made him much better, and that made Rick able to sit up. Looking down at his hands and touching his abdomen, he clenched his fists and felt every corner of his body. "Is anyone there?" A hoarse voice came from his throat. The 2-month silence made her throat feel a little uncomfortable. Just as she was about to ask again, she felt a tickle in her throat. Cough, cough, cough. The violent coughing caused Rick's brain to run out of oxygen. He rose from the bed sideways, trying to find some water, but his legs went weak and he fell straight to the floor. The creaky door opened and the nurse followed by the janitors walked in. When they saw Rick lying on the floor, they immediately stepped forward to help him up. After the nurse made sure Rick wasn't hurt, she began to check his condition. "Rick, right? You've been in a coma for a long time." Candace smiled and looked at Rick. Rick was full of doubt and was about to ask, but Edwin Jenner pulled out a radio and said, "ZZ. Aaron, your friend is awake." "Roger that, I'll be right there." Only a man's voice came out of the radio. Just 2 minutes later, footsteps were heard outside the door and a serious-looking young man with strong appearance, messy black hair and wearing a uniform entered the room. Rick suddenly felt that this person looked familiar and he had definitely seen him somewhere. "Hey, Rick, remember me?" Aaron greeted with a smile and walked forward at the same time. "Who are you? I think I should know you." Rick searched his still somewhat confused memory, and Aaron's face gradually overlapped with a person. "Was it you who took action against that thief?" What was your name?" Rick patted his head awkwardly. "Don't force yourself. I'm Aaron. Even though we didn't interact long, you should know me. How's the checkup?" When Aaron finished speaking, he looked at the nurse. "Yes, Aaron. I remembered, I feel fine, there's no need for you to check my condition." Candace suddenly said from the side, "I think you should let them check your condition. You've been in a coma for a long time and there needs to be an examination of how your recovery is going." Rick nodded silently when he heard this and obediently lay down. After an inspection, the nurse took off her stethoscope and said with a smile, "Rick, congratulations, you are very healthy and your recovery is complete." Originally, when Rick woke up among the walking dead, his wounds did not heal completely, but that was because the medicine and nutrition were not enough. Many people may say that it is unreasonable that Rick would have survived after staying in the hospital for 2 months. But in fact, it is not possible. When everyone was busy surviving, the King County Hospital was on the move for the next month. Even after the outbreak, there were people in King County helping patients. Patients in the hospital died one by one from lack of medicine, but there were people who continued to care for the remaining ones. A large number of walking corpses gradually gathered in one room, and that room was the room where Rick saw the words, "There are dead people inside, don't open the door," after waking up. And now Rick, because of the good care he received, is recovering very well, and his wounds healed long ago. Rick finally waited until he finished the inspection and immediately asked the question he had been holding back for a long time. "Aaron, where am I? Where is my family? Why am I here with you?" Rick asked a series of questions and couldn't answer it himself. Patting Rick on the shoulder to signal him to lie down first, Aaron first said, "Rick, your family is fine and Shane is alive. Don't worry, I'll tell you in detail what happened." Aaron then briefly told Rick what happened over the past few days from the time he was shot until he woke up. Rick held his head in disbelief. He couldn't believe he had been lying down for 2 full months. Edwin Jenner also said next to him, "When Aaron and his people brought you, I thought you were a test subject and infected with the virus. You really have him to thank. Thanks to him you were cared for 2 months in conditions unthinkable today on the outside. Many thought you wouldn't wake up, but Aaron was convinced you would." Rick slowly sat up, put his hands on Aaron's arm and said solemnly, "Aaron, I owe you my life." "Yes. You owe me your life." Aaron also held his face purposefully and repeated in Rick's tone. The two men looked at each other for a few seconds. Rick couldn't help but laugh, followed by Aaron. He. The relationship between the two became closer amidst the laughter, and gradually a sense of trust formed that didn't require words. The Jenners also looked at each other and smiled. In this time filled with death and betrayal, this kind of affection inspired by mutual kindness makes them feel extremely precious right now. Aaron signaled Rick to wait a moment, then pulled out the radio and pressed the button to send sound. "ZZ. Shane, this is Aaron. Can you hear me? Over." "ZZ. Copy that, Aaron. This is Shane. What's up? Over." "ZZ. I think you better call Lori on your side. Over." "ZZ. This is Lori. I'm right next to Shane. What happened? Did something happen to Rick? Lori's tone sounded a little concerned. Aaron didn't answer directly. He handed the radio to Rick, who was a little excited next to her, and said, "Take your time." ZZ. Lori. It's me. ZZ. Rick's hand holding the radio shook slightly. Knowing what happened in this time period scared the hell out of him. Fortunately, his wife and son were fine. ZZ. Oh, thank God, you finally woke up. Do you know how worried Carl and I are? Lori's voice sounded a little choked up, obviously very excited. ZZ. I'm sorry, Lori, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been gone so long. I should have been by your side to protect you. Listen, I'll come get you tomorrow, just wait a little longer. Rick showed the proper responsibility of a man, which made Aaron admire him greatly. The reason why Rick became the most popular character in the whole play is that the temperament and decisive personality of this kind of mature man are absolutely suitable aesthetics for most people who would give everything for their own. Rick didn't say much, just asked Lori about her recent situation and then handed the radio back to Aaron. ZZ. Shane, things on my end have been brought under control and I can now go far away without worrying about the security of this place. Be ready, we'll be there tomorrow. The next day, the clock struck 7 o'clock and Aaron woke up instinctively. He looked at the ceiling of his small room and took a deep breath. Today seemed to be a busy day. As he dressed, Aaron looked at himself in the mirror with a serious face. Honestly, he has had problems in his communication with others when he wanted to reflect a friendlier attitude. He didn't know if it was because he had to maintain a leader profile or that's just his personality. When he was ready, he left the room to the command room. The place and roles had changed. Aaron handed the role to Tyler of watching this place by the cameras, while the ex-soldiers next to him were in charge of taking care of this place, being the closest people to him. The ranks and security were still clear. Civilians were civilians and had to do work to keep this place moving. While soldiers or people with guns who kept this place safe had an official rank. Get ready to move out. We are going to have a long trip where we will possibly pick up many survivors, ordered Aaron Darcy with a calm look on his face. This time he planned to take half of the soldiers under his ranks, of which had not had much contact with the outside. Some of whom were not soldiers. They were trained for a month so they would be ready. Aaron also went on expedition and got to know more closely the people who decided to continue protecting the others. I'll take care of assembling the team, sir, said Mike, who was the black-skinned soldier that Aaron had saved when the temporary shelter outside had been abandoned by the army. With a group of 10 people, Aaron looked at them all with a serious face and said, "The situation is as follows. We move to King County to search for resources and survivors. Then we will move to Atlanta and from there we will take a detour." Understood. Get the vehicles ready. We'll move in 10 minutes. Yes. Looking around, Aaron sighed and walked towards the exit. Looking at Mike, who looked very serious, Aaron said, "The trip will be quiet. Remember to be more afraid of the living and not the dead. Those walkers are slow and without intelligence. We just have to open our eyes wide so we don't run into a wave." "I understand, sir." Mike nodded. Since joining under Aaron's orders, he learned many things about walkers. The place outside the CDC was cleared weeks ago and all the walker bodies were cremated away from this place. At this time, the surroundings of the CDC were clean of corpses, although there were still some bodies scattered around. At this time, Rick and Aaron along with the other soldiers got into several different cars and all exited the CDC garage. Looking at the walkers approaching towards the group of cars, Aaron pointed out, "Rick, the people infected by the virus are no longer human." As Aaron looked at the established route, there was a series of gunshots not far from their position, followed by shots from a higher caliber rifle. "I understand." The sound of gunshots startled Rick, and he moved his head to look out the window in the direction they were heard. However, there were a lot of buildings and it seemed that the sounds were coming from a place much farther away than he thought. Aaron, who looked at this, folded up the map and held up his assault rifle. Picking up the radio, Aaron reported, "Although the bullets can't pierce the armor, beware of a major attack." Roger that. Last night, Aaron and Rick discussed what would be done today. Their first stop was to go to the police station in King County to take the remaining weapons and ammunition. Although Aaron had plenty of resources in storage and a few out-of-the-way spots of supplies he had not yet picked up, he was in no hurry to take everything at once and anything he could gather was welcome. Another reason he was undertaking this trip was to pick up some survivors who had stayed behind in the county buildings, and from time to time he would get information over the radio. Although the road leading into King County was blocked, the oncoming lane was not obstructed. Occasionally a few abandoned vehicles could be seen, but it did not affect the pace of the drive at all. It didn't take long for everyone to drive into town, and there weren't many walkers to be seen, perhaps because the townspeople had left to seek shelter and there were very few infected. Rick looked all around the outside and couldn't help but sigh helplessly. After he mentioned his house, the group of cars turned onto the street where Rick's house was. Stopping, everyone got out of the cars and Aaron walked down the street in silence. "Aaron, I'll go inside and take a brief look around. I need the key to the police station, wait here." After Rick finished speaking, he walked into the room with an M1911 that Aaron had handed him. Aaron walked to a building in the distance and looked out the windows and waved his hands overhead. "It's safe to come out, we're here to take you to safety." As soon as he finished speaking, Mike and some soldiers came rushing to his side. Looking at Aaron, he hurriedly asked, "Are they survivors?" Peering into the houses, Mike found that there were many eyes staring at them in silence. His heart fluttered and he shouted, "There are survivors, get the truck ready to evacuate them." Seeing Mike so agitated, Aaron pointed out, "Most of them are old people who could not move freely due to the shock. If we did not come for them today, they would possibly starve to death. There aren't many of them, get them on the trucks and check them for injuries." "I'll handle it." When he heard Aaron's words, Mike agreed. Times really are tough, and nowadays it's complicated for seniors to be accepted. It was a surprise that Aaron approved to take them, without him realizing it. The respect he felt for Aaron grew more, and he internally committed himself not to make mistakes. Aaron didn't follow Mike to rescue the survivors, but walked along the edges of the street, took out his dagger and took out some walkers one by one. Crack. Black blood came out of their brains, staining the ground, and after being stabbed in the back of the head they stopped moving. He then walked to the courtyard of a nearby home and spoke into the radio after tuning to a channel. "We're here to evacuate people, it's safe to come out." The second-floor window suddenly opened and a black boy exposed his upper body, waved to Aaron and ran down the stairs. Not long after, the front door opened and out came a family of three: Morgan, his wife Jenny and their son Dwayne. "Aaron, they're here." Morgan hugged Aaron with a smile on his face, and Jenny also stepped forward to hug Aaron. "Hello, Mr. Soldier." Dwayne walked up next to his mother and greeted Aaron. Aaron smiled and touched Dwayne's head, then turned his head and said to Morgan, "Morgan, Jenny, I didn't think there were that many survivors in this place. If I'm being honest, I didn't expect them to come through this place again so soon. If it wasn't for you and your group, Jenny wouldn't be right next to us." Morgan was very pleasantly surprised by Aaron's arrival. He received his message only less than 12 hours ago, so Morgan didn't expect his arrival to be so quick. "Morgan, we are passing through King County and we have decided to take all the survivors you gathered in this place." After saying that, Aaron said, "Today I can take you to a place where your safety will be safe. It is not safe to go out every day to find supplies. This time we will move to Atlanta for another group of survivors, and I think the more people we are, the better we can develop." Just as Aaron was speaking, Rick came out of the nearby dwelling. Seeing a stranger, Rick approached with some hesitation. "Aaron, do you know them?" Rick looked at the three people in front of him, a common family like his own. Aaron looked at Rick and said, "This is Morgan, Jenny and Dwayne. I met Jenny when me and my group came through here earlier. We stopped and took out some walkers before splitting up." After speaking, Aaron introduced Morgan's family. "This is my friend, Rick. He's obviously a cop, one of the good guys." When Morgan saw Rick's police uniform, he roughly guessed his identity, and the moment he heard Aaron's introduction, he gave Rick a friendly nod. Rick still eyed Morgan warily and asked tentatively, "This house is home to other people?" Morgan simply nodded and said, "We never saw the original owners. The house was empty when we arrived." Just as the conversation was about to get longer, Mike arrived at Aaron's side and saluted, "Sir, the civilians and their belongings have boarded the truck. There are 8 people and most of them are seniors. Get ready to move out of this place," Aaron said with a nod. "Roger that." Mike looked at the civilians next to Aaron and stepped back before waving slightly. He quickly stepped back and began ordering the soldiers to get ready to stand down. Aaron noticed the surprised looks from the others and said, "Although it may not look like it, I am a retired soldier and currently protecting a CDC facility that still remains active." "That's good news. I'm glad there's still some of the military left on the streets of the country." Morgan smiled reassuringly. Rick was amazed that Aaron, who seems very young for such a long history, would maintain the safety of a safe haven. Aaron put his hands down and looked at his watch. It was already past 8 in the morning and his fingers tapped on the clock. Rick understood he had to leave, so he turned and walked to the car. "Morgan, Atlanta is currently completely occupied by walkers. The time has come for you to make a decision. Follow us or stay." Aaron invited him for the last time. Okay. Wait a minute. We have to go get our stuff. Morgan's family rushed into the house. Aaron didn't wait outside and walked to eliminate other walkers. Not long after, the Morgan family came out, each with a not-so-big backpack, and the group boarded the modified RV bus where Aaron and Jeroge along with Rick were traveling. Originally, Morgan and the others were already attracted by the appearance of this modified RV. On the outside it has a very fierce appearance. Being able to own such a car in this apocalyptic world will undoubtedly greatly enhance their safety. King County Police Department, Weapons Depot. Clack. There was no one at the King County Police Station and a group of people quickly arrived at the ammunition depot. There are a lot fewer guns here, said Rick as he entered the ammunition depot. The group quickly reached the deepest part of the ammunition depot. There were still a lot of firearms and some bullets in the gun rack. They all gathered up the guns and ammunition in a hurry, and Rick put his Colt Python revolver back in its holster and picked up a Remington 700 and handed it to Morgan. Rick said, "Although it may not look like it, it's a very accurate weapon." Morgan took the gun, tried to point it to the side and nodded. "If we're done here, let's get moving," Aaron said with a slight smile. It always felt good to find new weapons. After looking at Aaron's equipment, Rick remarked, "Well, I guess you don't need weapons, you're well prepared." They all began moving the equipment into the depot and in an instant 3 large bags of weapons were taken away, then all were taken to the trucks and out of the depot shortly thereafter. Aaron, who had just left the ammunition depot, looked around, but didn't see the police body that Rick had dealt with at the beginning of the plot. He saved himself some ammo. Aaron thought to himself. "Sir, what are the next moves?" Mike asked with a calm look on his face. "Once the time comes we will split into 2 groups, send someone to take the civilians to the CDC and the rest to follow us." Seeing the older civilians in a military truck, Aaron did not hesitate. He decided to send these people to the center first to rest and familiarize themselves with the environment. When the instructions were given, they all climbed into the cars and trucks leaving the place leaving only a cloud of dust. Aaron in the co-pilot's seat, his eyes gazed into outer space as he held a radio in his hands and glanced from time to time at the general situation of the group, fearing any accidents, and only gradually relaxed when the trip passed smoothly out of King County. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, the group split into 2 parts, one driving to the CDC center and the other heading to where Shane's group of survivors were. Looking out the window that they were getting closer and closer to the site, Aaron picked up the radio and said in a serious voice, "ZZ. Shane, we're heading towards your place, is everyone ready to be picked up?" A short time later, Shane's voice came out of the radio and noted, "We're not complete. Part of the group went for supplies and haven't returned yet, they are in town. Then we'll go through them and then come back for you." Understood. Hearing Aaron's decision, Rick nodded his head as well. As he had understood, that group of survivors was with his wife and he had to show his sincerity by helping them. He also wanted to see how the city was doing, maybe even better than King County. Having the information shared, 2 trucks and 2 Humvees with machine guns drove towards the outskirts of Atlanta. Judging from the information shown on the map, this place should not be far from the mall Glenn and the others went to. Looking at Morgan, who decided to follow Aaron along with his family, he said, "Morgan, go to the upper booth by the stairs. There's a good shooting port, you can look around for the time being. Before we return, you can protect this place along with the other soldiers." After explaining, Aaron then led Rick and 2 other soldiers into the mall. To tell the truth, Aaron didn't want to visit Atlanta but he was forced to. He vaguely remembered that there was a group of good-hearted refugees in Atlanta and Glenn along with the others might not make it out alive if he took Rick directly to the camp. With that in mind, Aaron wanted to see what it was like in a city and sharpen Rick's skills. Following Aaron's instructions, Morgan found the entrance to the mezzanine on the roof. Secretly admiring the powerful modification of this bus, Morgan sat there firmly and continued to observe the surrounding situation through the shooting port. By this time, Aaron, Mike and another soldier were wearing a black tactical uniform and prepared to depart. Weapons-wise, they were all equipped with a modified M4, several magazines in the vest and pistols in the waistband. Rick was still wearing the county police uniform, with a pistol strapped to his waist and a machete in hand. Considering the firepower issue that shouldn't be necessary, they all carried edged weapons to carry a silent ride along. The place where the 2 got out of the car was still some distance from the shopping center Shane mentioned. There were relatively few walkers out of town, which didn't cause too many obstacles for the group of 4. Under the influence of the people around them, Rick attempted to use his machete to take out the walkers that weren't particularly dense. After all, they were aware that even a silenced shot could attract unnecessary trouble. After walking for about half an hour, the 4 finally approached the mall marked on the map. Keep your eyes open in all directions. Any alleyway can be our escape route. Aaron reminded with a shrewd look. Roger that, sir. The city seems relatively empty. Mike looked around with a slight nervousness. Look. The surrounding area is full of useful weapons and resources that the army left stationed here. After we take all the people this time, we should plan to clean this place thoroughly and take these heavy weapons to the CDC. As he walked over to Aaron, Aaron talked to Private Mike about future plans. Aaron had been very careful and taught them all that as long as there is profit to be made, they should take everything even if it is of no use to them. All these heavy weapons in the vicinity could fall into enemy hands at some point. Now that Aaron is in this world, looking at the small details, he must make sure he doesn't miss anything. No matter what group or community he encounters, when that time comes he will have more tanks and weapons than they do. If they have more people, he will have experienced soldiers in their ranks. Aaron just wants to see who dares to take him on in the future. He will cut them to pieces or tear so many holes in them they won't know where they are breathing. Rick's machete split the forehead of a walker next to him. He raised his leg and kicked him, then he turned his head and asked doubtfully. Why do you collect so many guns? Isn't it enough to use some guns for self-defense? I looked at the CDC and they even have tanks. Aaron and Mike turned their heads and looked directly at Rick. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Rick looked uncomfortable. Just as he was about to speak, the soldier next to him who had remained silent answered his question. They are like candy. When the candy is delicious and there is less and less candy in a jar, the people who love that candy will fight with all their might to get the remaining candy. What would you do? Rick frowned and thought carefully. He was aware of the food problem, but if there is no food, we can grow food. As long as there are people, there shouldn't be any problem to survive. That's your choice. If it were someone else, maybe they would choose to steal the food. Someone else would try to intimidate or threaten you. Those who don't want to farm, maybe they would opt for cannibalism. Have you thought about that? Hearing this, Rick said nothing as he thought about it. It's not that you haven't thought about this, you just don't want to believe it. The end of the world will reveal the darker side of human nature, and all it takes is some time. After saying that, Aaron smiled and pointed out, that's something we can't change, but we could take care of ourselves and our people to avoid those problems. I understand what you mean, but I still firmly believe that there are more good people than bad. All men are bad, Rick. All humans are selfish. The sooner we accept that this world went to shit, we learn to survive, said Mike after Aaron taught him and he learned it himself with his superiors when they abandoned him. As they talked, they arrived near the mall, which was built on the outskirts of the city. The four of them continued to move forward as they cleaned up the corpses, and soon Aaron found a tank parked at an intersection. This was so familiar. Aaron walked to the side of the tank, motioned for Mike to help him up. Seeing this, Rick shouted softly, "Hey, what are you guys doing? We gotta move." Signaling Rick to wait, Aaron quickly entered through the entrance above the tank and, within a minute, showed his head again, smiling at Rick and holding up the items in his hand. Rick looked closer and it turned out to be an M9 pistol and a grenade. He motioned and told Aaron to get down quickly. Resources are valuable, I think it's my new obsession, Aaron muttered as he earned the smiles of his companions. But at that moment, bang! A gunshot came from somewhere above his head, and Aaron turned his head to look around. Bang! Bang! Identify the location of the gunfire this instant, Aaron ordered as he jumped off the tank and took cover. The shot rang out as if it was a single-shot rifle. Rick turned his head and looked around, but saw a large amount of walking corpses coming out of the corner in the distance. "Let's move to the alley on the right," shouted Mike as he would have the way. "Rick, let's go." Rick was dragged by Aaron and they all moved down the alley. Bang bang bang. Rick pulled out his gun and shot the three walkers crawling under their feet, one by one. Up the ladder. Bang bang bang. Mike and Aaron fired accurately at the walkers' heads. Rick was assisted by the other soldier and then Aaron ordered Mike up.